Welcome. We'll call this regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors, May 22nd, to order. Yolande, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Madam Clerk, are there any corrections and or deletions to the agenda?
Yes, Chair. Yesterday afternoon, an addendum agenda was posted, adding agenda item number 28 to the agenda for today's meeting. And also, staff has requested agenda item 20 be pulled from the agenda, and it will return at a future regular meeting.
All right. Board, are there any changes? Staff, no other changes? Okay. Then our first item today is a certificate of recognition for the Nevada Union High School debate program. Coach Mr. Stephen Goldberg, and for two debate team members who qualified to compete in the policy debate at the Tournament of Champions held at the University of Kentucky. I'm going to turn this over to Supervisor Hall for the presentation.
Thank you, and why don't we have the awardees come on down? You can sit down front and you'll get a chance to say something when we're done here. I'm very excited to be the one presenting this certificate of recognition to this great program and these wonderful young men. So I'm going to read out the certificate for you as you figure out where you're sitting. So those tough decisions, right? So let's see you debate it out. Okay. The Board of Supervisors hereby recognizes the outstanding achievements of the Nevada Union High School debate program over the past 2 decades. There's a very long list of Nevada Union teachers, administrators, coaches, and parents who spent enormous amounts of time and energy to support these hardworking and dedicated student debate teams. But throughout the years, there's been one individual at the center of those efforts, Staff Attorney for Legal Services of Northern California and Sacramento, Mr. Stephen Goldberg. As a part-time employee of the Nevada Joint Union High School District, Mr. Goldberg is paid a stipend which he generously donates back to the debate program. He drives from Sacramento every Wednesday evening to teach and coach the school's debate teams who participate in over 15 tournaments per year, which are held over weekends at major colleges in the western United States and even nationally. Mr. Goldberg also coaches 2 other high school debate programs in Sacramento, teaches a course at American River College, and plays the trombone in 2 jazz bands. That's awesome. This coming school year will mark Mr. Goldberg's 20th year volunteering as Nevada Union High School's debate coach. During this year's tournament season, 2 of Mr. Goldberg's students qualified to compete in policy debate at the esteemed Tournament of Champions held annually at the University of Kentucky since 1971. The last Nevada Union High School team to qualify for the tournament was in 2004. Morgan Margulies, a senior with a 4.4 GPA, and Devin Anderson, a junior with a 4.2 GPA, are ranked as one of the top 50 policy debate teams in the country. The Nevada County Board of Supervisors congratulates debate coach Stephen Goldberg and debate students Morgan Margulies and Devin Anderson for their dedication to academic excellence, personal commitment, and all of the hard work that helps to make the Nevada Union debate program such a resounding success. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Do you want to add?
Have anything they want to add?
Well, I'd like to add that I had the pleasure at my Rotary Club this morning of having the program be in the debate team, and truly, truly impressed. I hate to catch you off guard. Did you happen to bring that example of spreading?
I did not.
You did not.
There was something
You have it memorized?
I could read something off my phone. Yeah, I don't quite.
You don't need to
wait.
do that, Mark.
I do actually. Just kidding.
There are
prepared.
things,
He's
there are
prepared.
things that we could learn from these guys, let me
Yeah.
tell you. You have it, this is called spreading, right? And
Yeah.
give an explanation as to what it is, Morgan.
Okay, so in debate, there's a lot of evidence presented, and in the first 8 speeches, you want to get out as much evidence as possible. And this is for like the very high level varsity debates. Novice debate, it's very focused on like form and the way you present, but in varsity debate, it's very focused on what you're saying, less about how you're saying it. So people speed read through the evidence that they're presenting as it's already been given to the other team as they're able to read it. So I'll give an example of what speed reading is for the request of Ed Schofield. Policy debate is a form of debate competition where 2 teams advocate for the against a resolution and typically calls for policy change by the United States federal government is also referred to as a cross-examination debate because of the 3-minute questioning period followed by each constructive speech. Affirmative teams generally present a plan of the proposal for implementation of the resolution.
Sold American.
The point is that the debaters understand what he said, and the judges understand what they said. So I am just truly impressed and just honored to make this presentation today, and thank you for bringing them forward, Heidi. Is there any other comments? Dan?
I'm always thrilled to see Nevada Union and the accomplishments they have. Mr. Goldberg, I can't believe what you do for 20 years to drive up here and instruct these students, and to see 2 of them that got to go to the University of Kentucky. That's quite an honor. Nationally, the recognition for our community is priceless. Thank you.
Richard?
Ditto with regard to recognition, but just as critically, if not more so, is that the public speaking skills, the skills in logical reasoning will be very helpful for their future careers. So thank you for being involved in advancing this program, and I'm impressed with that our 2 debaters are going off to Kentucky. It's fantastic.
Well, you've been, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
In that case, welcome home.
Thank you.
Hank?
Well, I'm always impressed with everybody in Nevada County, all those teams that we put forth, and they come out nationally, whether it's FFA, whether it's debate teams, music. I'm very proud of our youth, and you are our future. So I just wish you could train a little of us up here on how to debate well.
And I think I point out another thing that I heard this morning, that we're really unique. This team is quite unique as a rural school. Maybe you'd like to comment on that, Mr. Goldberg.
Yeah, this is one of the very few debate teams in a rural community that travels nationally and is competitive nationally, and one of the many reasons why I'm very proud and very happy to be a part of this program.
Morgan, Devin, would you like to make a comment?
A lot of the teams that we compete against are these big private schools that have 20 to 30 paid coaches that do most of their work and research for them. So it's definitely, there's resource disparities inherent within the policy debate community. So being able to be successful this year was it meant a lot, especially considering that it was us that got us there and not necessarily the money that we paid to go to a school.
Cool. Of course, that's another issue, is the money for this program, huh?
Yeah.
Devin?
I just think that the experience going to the TOC was not something that I would have expected going into this year at all. I was, a junior, just coming out of sophomore year, lower classman, and I really saw myself stepping up to the plate and, being kind of carried by Morgan and being in his hand the whole time, and him teaching me and me teaching him. It was definitely just a really great year of learning and kind of representing this community, which I did not think I'd be doing in my junior year of high school.
Is there any members of the public that would like to make a comment? Okay.
I know the parents are very proud back there, so good job, parents, too.
Well, we're very proud of you, and we're very pleased to make this presentation to you. So I think it's now time for a photo op, okay?
Thank you.
Come down front. All right, that was fun. I think 3 of the young people this morning said they wanted to go into politics. Really? I suggest law. Anyways, our next agenda item, thank you again, Heidi, for bringing that forward. This is a resolution proclaiming May 31st through June 3rd, 2018, as Celebration of Trails Weekend 2018 in conjunction with the National Trails Day. And the sponsor of this is our own Richard Anderson.
Thank you, Chair Schofield. As we all know, trails are an important recreational amenity for Nevada County. Our county is blessed with extraordinary terrain and natural amenities, and trails are a way for us to interact with with the natural environment, but also simply to enjoy the outdoors, to get exercise, and to take advantage of the wonders of the forest and the mountains that surround us. Every year, the Variable Land Trust hosts a celebration of trails, which is done in conjunction with National Trails Day. This year, they've extended it to a 4-day period running from May 31st, Thursday, May 31st through Sunday, June 3rd. And every year, the Board of Supervisors presents a resolution to the Land Trust regarding a proclamation regarding the celebration. And I will read that to my colleagues and to the public so that they understand what's happening. Resolution 18-183 of the Board of Supervisors of the County of Nevada. The resolution proclaiming May 31st through June 3rd as Celebration of Trails Weekend 2018 in Nevada County in conjunction with National Trails Day. Whereas trails have been a part of the Sierra Nevada landscape for millennia, having served as routes for communication and commerce by Native Americans, and later providing the means by which adventurers, fortune seekers, immigrants desiring a new life traverse the mountains to explore and settle the territory that would become California. And whereas trails in Nevada County not only reveal the history of our region, they serve as a means for enjoying the Sierra environment and intimately experiencing the outdoors, and represent an important recreational resource, creating opportunities to hike, run, bike, ski, and ride a horse. And whereas each year the Variable Land Trust, the Nevada County Board of Supervisors, state and federal agencies, local nonprofit groups, and businesses join communities across the nation in recognizing National Trails Day, thus reaffirming a commitment to the value of recreational trails, which is highlighted locally with a celebration of trails. And whereas hundreds of thousands of trail enthusiasts are expected to participate in a wide variety of activities on public trails at more than 1,000 nationally sanctioned Trails Day events across the nation. And whereas access to trails supports the missions of the Nevada County Planning and Health Departments to provide for the health and recreational needs of the citizens of Nevada County. And whereas the Board of Supervisors recognizes the value of collaborative partnerships with public and private agencies to support the ongoing construction and maintenance of trail networks throughout the county, including the Pines to Mines Trail that will someday link the east and west sides of Nevada County. And whereas trails and associated greenways provide access to wildlife habitat and migration corridors with rich native plant diversity, and also help reveal our region's historical and cultural legacies, thus providing opportunities for outdoor education. And whereas trail activities bring together friends, neighbors, and family, enhance quality of life, boost tourism, build community, and stimulate economic development in Nevada County, now therefore be it resolved that the Nevada County Board of Supervisors does hereby proclaim May 31st through June 3rd, 2018 as Nevada County Celebration of Trails Weekend 2018 in conjunction with National Trails Day. In recognition of Celebration of Trails Weekend, the board urges all citizens to seek out community activities and to discover, enjoy the beauty of, learn about, and celebrate local trails while participating in a hike-a-thon, educational programs, trail work projects, and an outdoor festival. So I'd like to ask representatives from the Variable Land Trust to come forward and if necessary, answer questions from us, but more critically, perhaps explain what's happening over the course of this weekend.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard, and the rest of the board for your recognition of this initiative that has been ongoing for a while now. My name is Erica Seward. I am the co-executive director of the Land Trust, and I'm joined today by Laura Peterson, who is our communications and outreach manager, Terry Hundemer, former board president and sits on our board, and very dedicated member of the organization, and Sean Clark, who is our lands access manager. And if you all would like to say a few words about the history of collaboration and working with the county, would be awesome.
Yeah, I can start. Like Erica said, my name is Sean Clark, and I've been at the Land Trust for 4 years, and every year we're working together a little more, and we're getting a little more creative with solving some of these problems with trails. But I want to thank you guys for working with the Land Trust. I was sitting there listening to this proclamation, and there's a lot in there, and I know for me, I really believe that trails have this ability to address a lot of these problems that we have in Nevada County. So thank you for working with us. I know we've worked with Supervisor Schofield to help maintain and restore Independence Trail, and working with Supervisor Anderson on Pines to Mines. So I'm encouraged with the enthusiasm to kind of keep moving forward, working together on these trail projects. I just went to a trail symposium in the Bay Area, and we're doing really good. It was affirmation that the Land Trust is doing really well, and it makes sense to partner and work collaboratively with you all, because trails, we're looking at big picture stuff and connectivity, and a lot of these trails are going to go across districts and other neighborhoods. So yeah, we just want to keep looking big picture and look at connectivity and keep building trails, and it's an important thing for Nevada County. So thank you for recognizing this Celebration of Trails Weekend.
Good morning, Terry Hundemer. As Eric mentioned, I'm a director, immediate past president of Variable Land Trust, and co-chair of the Trails Committee with Sean. As somebody that grew up here, I've been here for 45 years or so, seen a lot of changes, and grew up out in the country and enjoyed trails all my life. And as my kids are growing up, we need connectivity. You know, have our kids riding bikes out on these streets and roads today, it's just not safe. And so I joined this nonprofit and to push the mission of trying to help keep some of the trails that are existing, that are user-built, that need to be formalized, build new trails. Connectivity is so important, and as the proclamation says, it's all about our health, you know, getting out. I see a lot of staff here out on the trails, you know, your lunch break or staff breaks. It's healthy. Get outside, enjoy the trails, and I really want to appreciate Richard Anderson and his time working with us, with the Land Trust and different groups, not just Pines to Mines, but you know, we have all their other trail projects going on, and staff that continues to support us along the way. We need all the help we can get. It's a lot of work, and most of us are volunteers. So again, appreciate all your time.
And it is a community-wide endeavor. We couldn't do this without the support of many of our partners, and I'd like to mention a few of them. right now. The Bicyclists of Nevada County, Gold Country Trails Council, Pacific Crest Trail Association, Forest Trails Alliance, the Tahoe National Forest, Sierra Club, State Parks, the City of Nevada City, City of Grass Valley, the county, as well as local businesses and other nonprofits. And, you know, it is about a shared vision, and we're looking forward to continuing the dialogue across many different groups. We just participated yesterday in the cultural district's creative placemaking conversations, and I think there is so much potential within the maybe not so obvious places with arts and with outdoor recreation and other groups coming together to really elevate and speak to the work that is being done here within the county, and making, you know, this community a beacon for others to kind of look at the work and the leadership that is happening. So thank you for your continued support.
Erica, could someone give us an overview of what's happening for the celebration and how people can find out more information about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So you could go to our website for a full calendar of events, bylt.org. Thursday evening, we'll be kicking off our fireside chats, which is at the in-town campground, and Hank Meals will be there talking about the history of our lands around a campfire. So that is something that we always look forward to, hearing his lively presentations. Friday, we'll be meeting for Ales for Trails event at Old Republic Brewery, the taproom location. And then Saturday is a full day between two locations. We're hosting a hike-a-thon that is up on Highway 20 on the Future Pines to Mines Trail. We'll be having our starting point just west of White Cloud, and we'll be shuttling folks here from the Root Center, so you can park here and early in the morning. So all the details are on our website for that, but we'll be doing a group hike, a 5-mile group hike, starting at 9 a.m. and then ending at the old 5 Mile House, which is the new Old Republic Roadhouse, for a full day celebration with food trucks and different Festival Village partners, a lot of the folks that I mentioned there. And then we have an afternoon, we segue into an afternoon festival setup at the tap room. So it is a full day of activities for folks to come out and get educated about our trails. We'll have presentations and recognition of our Adopt a Trail partners, a lot of volunteers who work tirelessly throughout the year to maintain our trails and working with the Land Trust. And then highlighting the Pines to Mines Trail project, as well as Sugarloaf and the Wolf Creek Trail with Grass Valley. Howard Levine will be present, Richard Anderson, and a few others, we're hoping. And that's all day Saturday. And then on Sunday, we have some group hikes and other outings scheduled as well. So it is a very busy weekend, full of a lot of opportunities for folks to get involved. So we hope you come join us.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. And just comments. I know that creating trails and the connecting, I know as well as anybody, it's not always that easy, and it's not always about the physical part of it either. But I do want to say that I really appreciate the efforts of the Bear Yuba Land Trust and the other organizations, but I feel like you're kind of the lead organization. Whenever anyone mentions trails, it's like, well, what does Bear Yuba Land Trust think of this? So I appreciate your efforts. I also want to commend Supervisor Anderson for his work along these lines also. So thank you for bringing them to us today, Richard.
My pleasure, Chair. Thank you.
Hank?
Well, I don't think I could add much other than I know trails are good, not only good for health, but they're also good for the economy. And the economy of this county relies heavily on trails. And I'm looking forward to Richard opening up the Pines Trail. I'm just waiting. Gonna cut the ribbon.
It'll be a little while, Hank.
Well, I hope to be
I
there.
don't want to walk it also. I want to see myself walking.
Heidi.
Not with the walker.
Thanks. I'm a huge fan of hiking and trails, and so I really appreciate all the work you all have been doing for many years to get good trails in place. I really appreciate that Supervisor Anderson has been taking the lead on this and making sure we move forward in this county. And I hope to join you guys on that beginning of the Pines Demise Trail to get a chance to see what that's going to look like. Thanks for all your work.
Dan?
Yeah, I'm an old trails guy from way back, but this really focuses and shows that Nevada County's on the leading edge, that we're out in front, showing other communities and counties what we can do. And so I applaud the work you do and the volunteers, and I know it takes a lot of work, and you're pretty much an example for the rest of California as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Okay, is there any public comment?
Can I make one more comment?
Yes, you
Sorry.
can, yes.
I'm not sure if we mentioned NID in our list, but we're recently been engaged with NID on trails, and I think it's worth mentioning that for many years it's been kind of a separate entity that they weren't quite sure if they wanted to get involved in trails in a lot of their lands. And over the last couple of years, they've started to broach the idea of introducing public access to some of their projects. And it's going well. And we actually have a group going out tonight to work on a bypass for the Scotts Flat Dam trail. Great. And I just wanted to throw it out there that there are more and more groups jumping in realizing that trails are important. And I wanted to mention that, and I appreciate NID's willingness to step into the fray.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Again, was there any public comment? Do you have one? No. We'll get to public comment. No. This is only on this subject. Okay. This is a resolution, so I'll recognize a motion from Supervisor Anderson and a second.
Chair, I move that we pass the resolution.
Okay.
I'll second.
And a second, Supervisor Hall. Madam Clerk?
District 4?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes. All right. Motion carried.
we
And
do a
let's
photo
do a photo op. Okay, so we're running a little behind. That's okay. So the next agenda item is our public comment. Members of the public shall be allowed to address the board on items not appearing on the agenda that are of interest to the public and are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. And if you'd like to make your public comments, come on down, take the seats here, give us your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, good morning. My name is Gary Baker from South County. I've written several letters over the last month or so regarding the RA rural and the inclusion of that zone in the urgency cannabis ordinance. The I'm not going to cover all of it again. I think I sent you something again over the weekend. But the bigger issue here is, you know, the elephant in the room with the cannabis in its entirety. We have a county that depends on this revenue, that depends on the jobs from cannabis. 3,500 cannabis farms in the county, which is, you know, it's 2,500 square foot per grow site. It's about 200 acres, or, you know, 1 acre for every 3,600 acres in the county. But if you have 10,000 people involved in this industry, yeah, directly involved, which is about 20% of the population over the age of 18, and we've put in such restrictive measures that either on the size of the cultivations that will be allowed or the location, you know, we have a problem. And I'm not talking just the illegal problem. I mean, that's always been a problem. But these jobs are going to need to be replaced. And if you have 10,000 people in their car every morning going to a parking lot for a job, I mean, you have traffic, you have air quality, you have a 80-acre parking lot. I mean, you know, by just saying, well, we're not going to allow it, or we're not going to, you know, let it occur in certain land areas where it's always occurred, what is the transition plan? I mean, we're just going to wake up one morning and no one has a job? I don't think that's really going to happen in that way. But clearly, this industry is changing. And it is not going to be economical in the long run for most people to participate. So as the leaders of this community, I'm asking you to, you know, think about this and agendize this and discuss this. Build your, you know, community activity groups around what are we going to do to replace these jobs. It's $480 million a year that comes into this county from cannabis. And if only 10% of these farms, or 300 farms, you know, get permits, you know, for one reason or another, not even because they were allowed to or not, just because of the economics involved, what are we going to do to address this? It's a codependent relationship that we all have. And I urge you to think about that. I also urge you to consider, you know, properties that are currently allowed to cultivate, that have that opportunity, you know, to cultivate in the future. You know, a vineyard and a winery and a wine tasting room has far more impact on a local neighborhood than a 2,500-foot cannabis operation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary. And I do want to point out we do have a cannabis item on the agenda later on today. This is a little iffy because it's on the emergency permits, commercial permits. So I'd kind of like to not talk too much about cannabis here this morning in public. Go ahead.
Mine is also, but I'm very brief. Hi, my name is Teresa Hinesley Evans, and I work in the medical cannabis industry. Many of the well-established medical cannabis cultivators that we work with are located in RA, including some of the pioneers in the field. So please allow them to continue to grow. Thank you.
Teresa, what was your last name?
Hinesley Evans.
Hinesley Evans. Okay, thank you.
I'm Lee French. I live in the Alta Sierra area. I've been on the CAG. I've been on several groups to help solve this problem, which I think is probably not going to be solvable for the liking of everyone. I do have to say that one of the basic things that we have to look at in this whole thing is that there are people who have moved here to enjoy life and the beauty and the tranquility of the area. And one of the reasons the RA area was a hot topic in all of the conversations has been that they infringe on the basic rights of people around them who have to put up with the increased traffic, the smell especially. And until we solve some of these problems, I think we've gone down the path that has really come up with some very good suggestions for the ordinance. And I commend the board for putting the CAG together and for listening to the CAG and for continuing on with good, sound thoughts about what is next. I understand the community depends somewhat on cannabis, but I think that in the future that the marketplace is going to determine how many people will actually be growing. And I think we're going to see with the abundance of growers that we have now, that they are going to be very impacted by the market and will probably be driven out of business also. Those are just some thoughts that I have. I do defend the fact that we do not grow outside in any residential area that will impact the basics that most of the people are here for. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Anybody else? All right, I will close the public comment period. Thank you. And the next agenda item is our consent calendar. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. The Board of Supervisors will act upon them at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request that an item be removed from the consent calendar for discussion. We already have item number 20 has been pulled. Board, any items? No. Staff, any items? Public, any items you want pulled? Very good. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Consent, less item 20.
Less item 20, right.
Motion Supervisor Weston, seconded Supervisor Miller. Madam Clerk?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes. Thank you. Used to a mass exodus of the staff, I guess.
You're also in enthralled.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's see, where are we? Department head matters. The first item is Phoebe Bell. Congratulations, Phoebe. Our new behavioral health director. Resolution approving standard agreement 17-94081 between the County of Nevada and the Department of Health Care Services for the purpose of identifying and providing drug Medi-Cal organized delivery system services for substance use disorder treatment in the maximum amount of $9,731,263 for the period of June 28, 2018 through June 30th, 2020. Authorizing the chair of the Board of Supervisors to execute the agreement and directing the Auditor Controller to amend the fiscal year 2017-18 Behavioral Health Department budget. This is a 4/5 required vote. Phoebe, you want to explain exactly what we got going here?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, good morning, Chair Schofield and members of the board. Phoebe Bell, Director of Behavioral Health, and I've brought with me Nicole Ibrahimi-Nukin, who's our Program Manager for Substance Use Disorder Services.
Good morning.
And we're here today to talk about an opportunity for Nevada County to really greatly expand substance use services in the county that we're really excited about. So first, just wanted to start with a little bit of background on why this is an important growth in our service system. You've heard a lot in the past about the need around substance use, and I won't spend too long on this, but as you know, this is a national issue, a statewide issue, but also an issue for Nevada County. We've heard a lot about the opioid crisis and the impact that's having on our society and on our community locally. I know you've heard some of the data around overdose death rates in Nevada County, rates of prescriptions being written for opioids, and also worth pointing out that we have issues around alcohol use as well, with use rates that are above state norms. So for all those reasons, we know that we have substance abuse as a factor in our community. And we see the ramifications of that in the behavioral health department. Last year, we provided services to close to 2,000 people through our contractors, people who are looking for help with their addiction issues. And we also know there's a lot of negative impacts from substance abuse in our community. As we look at the topic of homelessness, we know there's a high coexistence of substance use among folks who are long-term chronically homeless. Estimates range as high as 80% of people who are dealing with long-term homelessness also have substance use issues. Similarly, when we look at the criminal justice system, I've been talking to our probation department, our sheriff's office, and they estimate that as high as 75% of the folks coming through our jails and criminal justice system have coexisting substance use issues. And we know when we talk to our hospital partners that similarly substance use plays a big role in people who regularly use their emergency services. So there's a lot of impetus to say, what more can we do around addressing this issue? So by way of background, a handful of years ago when the Affordable Care Act was passed, one of the core mandates under the Affordable Care Act was this idea of parity, which essentially says that mental health and substance use treatment needs to be covered by insurance plans at the same level that primary care or physical health care is covered. So that laid the groundwork for system change that needed to happen, because traditionally we've not covered substance use services at the same level as physical health care. California looked at that issue and said, okay, what are we going to do to meet that mandate? How are we going to provide substance use treatment services in a more effective way? We've traditionally had what's called the drug Medi-Cal system, so a way of billing for some services under Medi-Cal, specifically for drug and alcohol services. And essentially, it's a fairly inadequate system. There's a very limited array of services that you're able to bill Medi-Cal for, and as a result, a lot of people don't access those services. A 2016 study out of UC Berkeley found that there's approximately 1.2 million Medi-Cal beneficiaries in California with substance use disorders, and less than 10% of them were receiving treatment for those disorders. So that's a pretty inadequate level of a system. So California basically said, we need to do something different. We need a different mechanism for how to treat this issue of substance use. And they worked out an agreement with the federal government for what's called the organized delivery system. And I will say, naming and marketing wouldn't be the strong suit, but it is a great system despite that. And so basically what this is a way of providing drug and alcohol services that's an option for counties to participate in. And so each county can decide if they want to opt into what's called the ODS, Organized Delivery System, and provide drug and alcohol services in their community in a different way that I'll explain a little more about. So essentially the goal of ODS is to improve access to substance use services, really with the ultimate goal of helping people have the resources they need to achieve stability and recovery. So how do we make this service system more accessible to people? There's a handful of really key elements of the ODS system that I think are probably the most important points about it, and the first one is probably the most exciting one, which is under the old system, there's, like I said, very limited services that you can bill Medi-Cal for. If you choose to enter into the ODS, there's a much more robust array of services that we can bill Medi-Cal for. So suddenly things that we've either paid for out of pocket or haven't been able to offer at all in our community will be services that we can bill for. So that really expands the levels of care available to the community. Secondly, ODS, by opting into ODS, we agree to design a system of care that's aligned with really the gold standard in treating addiction issues. There's something called the American Society of Addiction Medicine, or ASAM, and they have a standard of care that a community should have if you're going to really effectively address substance use disorders. In addition, they have screening criteria that you can use on an individual basis with people to determine what level of care is appropriate for them. So you can really allocate your resources effectively by aligning well-screened people with a robust array of services. So you have to agree to participate in the system in that way. Additionally, the ODS really encourages a much stronger emphasis on what's called medication-assisted treatment. And this is really a research-proven best practice that's emerging at this point that acknowledges that after long-term use of substances, people's brain chemistry shifts over time, and that medication-assisted treatment, using medicines to help stabilize the brain chemistry, gives people a much higher success rate in achieving recovery than just simply trying to stop using substances and having their brain chemistry be off-kilter still. And then lastly, ODS really mandates coordination of care at a much deeper level. So instead of having substance use services be sort of a side thing that happens by itself, kind of off in left field, it brings substance use treatment services into coordination with primary care and mental health care, so that we're really looking more holistically at people and managing their care like a managed care plan in a more comprehensive way. So to make that a little bit more clear, a quick chart of under the drug Medi-Cal system that we currently operate under. As you can see, it's a pretty limited array of services that we are able to offer to people that Medi-Cal will cover. Whereas if we opt into the ODS, that array of services gets much more robust. The biggest one on there is residential treatment. Under drug Medi-Cal, there's a very limited residential treatment benefit, which is simply for perinatal folks, so pregnant or new baby situations. Beyond that, we haven't been able to bill Medi-Cal for residential treatment. Under ODS, we would be able to, and the actual treatment itself is fully covered under ODS. But in addition, services like case management, which again allow that coordination of care, recovery services, which is sort of support for people post-residential treatment so that they have a higher success rate transitioning back into their daily life, all really important services that would really impact our ability to support people well. If we do enter into ODS, there's a handful of responsibilities that the county is committing to, essentially, to be in compliance and successfully be implementing ODS. So first and foremost, we have to ensure that all covered services are provided in our county. So that list of services you saw on that previous chart, we need to make sure that they're available here in Nevada County for our beneficiaries. Our proposal from the Behavioral Health Department is that we'll be contracting for those services. We won't be a direct service provider, but it's incumbent upon us to ensure that contractors are available in our community. This must include narcotic treatment program, which is essentially methadone treatment, which is a form of medication-assisted treatment, as well as other medication-assisted treatment services. So that full array has to be available to our beneficiaries. In addition, the county is responsible for establishing an authorization process for residential treatment. So just like under mental health care, where we need to establish medical necessity for somebody to get a certain level of care, similarly under ODS, we'll need to establish that somebody meets the medical necessity to need the level of care we're authorizing. And that's specifically around residential care, which is the most expensive form of care. And that goes back to that, using that ASAM criteria to screen people and say, yes, according to these criteria, this is the level of care this person needs. We have to have that process available. And under our plan, county staff will be doing that authorization process and assessment process. The county is also responsible for a much higher degree of sort of quality assurance and quality improvement oversight for the whole system of care, both the services we provide ourselves and the services our contractors provide. So this is a much higher degree of monitoring, being subject to state audits, and ensuring that we're really providing quality services in accordance with all expectations and mandates. Our system needs to be grounded in evidence-based practices, which is great. We already have a pretty wide array of best practices we use and that we support our contractors in using, things like motivational interviewing and cognitive behavioral therapy. So that is added into the substance use side, not just the mental health side. And then lastly, we need to have a memorandum of understanding with the two managed care plans that already operate in the Nevada County region, so Anthem Blue Cross and California Health and Wellness, essentially saying we're responsible for the substance use side and we'll coordinate care with you around people's primary care. So those are kind of the key expectations on the county. Probably the most important question is what are the financial implications of entering into the ODS? And I think there's sort of three main points that I think are probably the most important parts about this. First and foremost, essentially what we have designed our system to do is take the same amount of money we've been spending in previous years on substance use services, and that money is a combination of state and federal funds that we've used to essentially buy at 100% our cost certain services, so a limited amount of residential treatment, for example, and other services. We're going to take that same amount of money, but now we'll be able to bill Medi-Cal for those services and use our same amount of money as the match money. And so we'll be able to get 2 to 3 times as much services for the same amount of money. That's the most compelling piece of ODS and the most exciting aspect of it to us. Probably a second important point around the finances is we'll be able to take that same leveraging mechanism and offer it to other departments who currently spend money on substance use services. So probation, child welfare, CalWORKs all have funding that allows them to, essentially purchase substance use treatment for the folks they're serving. They'll now bring their funding under the behavioral health umbrella so that we can bill Medi-Cal for those same services. And again, they'll be able to buy more services than they could before with their dollars. And then lastly, what you have in front of you today is a resolution asking for 2 years of funding at $4.8 million per year, not funding, of capacity to bill for revenue from Medi-Cal to that level. That is much higher than where we plan to go, but that's our state negotiated cap, or the maximum we could bill the state for under drug Medi-Cal. In practice, we've built a budget that we think better reflects the usage we're likely to see and our capacity to pay for that match. Important to note, there will be some amendments to the budget over the course of the next year because that process of pulling in the other departments' contracts we haven't finished that yet. We still need to pull in the CalWORKs and child welfare contracts. So we know there'll be amendments on that front. It is important to say this is a new system. We haven't done this before, and in fact, very few counties have done this. There's others ahead of us, but not that much ahead of us. So we have designed a system that we think really accurately reflects the need we see in the community and the resources we have available to us. But there are question marks of how will this really look once it's fully rolled out. So I think it's important to say that. But at the end of the day, we are really excited about the fact that we're going to be able to spread our money much further and access a lot more services for our community. So in that sense, just to wrap this up, I think the biggest exciting piece about this ODS process is this growth in treatment services. This is an opportunity to really radically change the system of care for people with substance use issues, really for the better in our county. In addition, we see this as an opportunity to take a step further down the road of integrating care for substance use and mental health. We know that many, many people have what's called co-occurring disorders. Both issues are challenges for them, and typically those systems have operated in parallel but not in conjunction with one another. We'll be cross-training our whole access team in doing assessments for both behavioral, mental health, and substance use. And that's the beginning of creating a system of care that's really fully integrated all the way through, and we're excited about that system change. Also, as I discussed, bringing the other departments' contracts under the behavioral health contract, I think will really simplify the county face around substance use treatment for our community partners. Instead of having all these different pathways of getting people into substance use treatment with different criteria and different funding mechanisms, there'll be one interface for community partners, which I think will really simplify the experience. And then lastly, one of the mandates around ODS is around integrating care with our primary care providers, and so we look forward to developing that process a little bit more as well. So basically today, we're here today to ask for authorization to enter into this contract with the state, and we hope that you are as excited as we are about this opportunity to expand services for Medi-Cal beneficiaries in Nevada County. And with that, we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Phoebe. Very good presentation. Questions?
Yeah,
Supervisor Miller?
Phoebe, on the residential treatment, which is a new component that's pretty exciting, actually. The county staff is going to process the authorization for that, and then are we contracting out for services, and are we contracting locally, or are we contracting from out of the area?
These are local contracts, and in addition to entering into ODS, as you know, we also this past year were able to open up BOS House, so we've expanded our system capacity in that way, and now we'll have a funding mechanism to really support for full utilization of that.
Does BOS House count as residential treatment then?
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right. Also, the other part of that was we have to have a methadone facility or treatment facility, so that's been satisfied with the facility on Margaret Lane, right?
Yes.
How is that going?
So far, it appears to be going well. Pretty small usage of it at this point, and to date, it seems like things have been going smoothly.
Okay. Great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Richard?
Thank you, Chair Schofield. Maybe my usual question, the service needs differ between east side and west side of the county, and if they do you anticipate implementing ODS in differing manners across both sides of the county.
So one exciting thing about ODS, and really this is kind of concurrent with ODS, is there's this whole hub and spoke model, which is a little bit confusing, but essentially the idea of how to, there's been a lot of thought put into how do we reach more isolated, smaller communities with treatment services. And so Tahoe Forest Hospital has stepped up to become essentially a spoke, which is a chance to offer medication-assisted treatment in the Truckee area with support from a kind of hub, a main office down the hill. And so that's really exciting. That's a big shift for us up in the Truckee area in terms of having that service available. In addition, CORE is our primary contractor up in the Truckee area, and they'll be able to offer a deeper array of outpatient services in the Truckee area. And then lastly, residential treatment does not exist up there, but that's not uncommon for communities to have a small traveling distance to residential treatment, but the access process will be smoother for people. So we foresee more people from Truckee being able to access residential treatment down here, but with in-place recovery services after the fact back up in Truckee.
Well, this is certainly exciting. The enhancement in services and also the increase in funding are huge pluses for our county. The staff report, though, indicates that, or states, this agreement provides for anticipated federal drug, Medi-Cal, and or state general fund reimbursement. The word anticipated to me implies some uncertainty. Are we confident that the monies will be available for this fiscal year, next fiscal year? The $4.8 million for each fiscal year?
Yeah, the anticipated, I think, refers to the fact that it's a billable resource, and so we only get the revenue as we bill for it.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No questions. Good report, and yes, I'm sure you will expand it, and we'll have a great program.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phoebe and Nicole. I know that, Nicole, especially, you've been working on this for a really long time and have been very hopeful. And again, I'm proud that Nevada County is stepping forward and taking a little bit of a lead in this. I anticipate that this is going to address a number of issues that we've been seeing around homelessness, around the siloing of treatment, and I'm really excited that we're going to have access to this money. So please keep us updated on how it goes and what we can do to help, and good luck. It's going to be a lot of work, and already has been a lot of work, I know. So thanks for stepping forward on this. I really appreciate it.
Phoebe, does the program include any prevention?
So this program per se does not. One of the funding streams that supports drug and alcohol services is SABG, standing for substance abuse, something. And that's, what's that? Block grant, thank you. And that's the funding that we fund our prevention programming through, and behavioral health essentially contracts with public health to implement the prevention programming. So a lot of the work you've heard about before, both from behavioral health and public health, is funded with that funding.
So you guys work together on that?
Yeah, very closely.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, we have some public comment on that. Would you come on up and give us your name?
My name is Carrie Becker. I'm a law writer. I co-author the 420 law for the state of California. I'd like to ask mental health what part of the program is where you work with the cannabis patients. Cannabis has been proven to take people off opioids. I personally went to Auburn Pain Clinic where I was released on synthetic heroin into this county without any help getting off of things like this. I'd like to know if you have your Hope House and your program. I've also had a family member in there twice in the residential, very expensive to get a person in there, and failed it twice. We had to go to Santa Rosa, where she is now off cigarettes, off all kinds of things. Her teeth were knocked out by a man in this county she was living with. The DA did not prosecute and help my daughter in court at all. I am just so disappointed with mental health, even posting a sign 20 years ago that you would not work with medical cannabis patients. I walked into mental health and took a photo, and I was asked by the guard not to take a photo. So then I approached the counter and asked if I could have a copy, a physical copy of the sign that says we will not work with medical cannabis patients. Well, the 420 law was already written. You have to work with medical cannabis patients. I believe you do now. I've been into mental health, and I've heard patients talking to different counselors that you do coordinate it. I would like to see something put in there where you could say to, we're in a room right now full of cannabis people, and we would like to be able to know that our family can get off of these opioids doctors put us on with using something that's not harmful to our kidneys and our liver.
And please address
DA of
yourself
San
to us.
Francisco,
And would you tell me your name again?
Carrie Becker.
Thank you,
I've lived in
Carrie.
this
Thank
county
you.
for 32 years.
Okay, okay.
And I've taken our DA Ferguson, our wonderful DA Ferguson, down to San Francisco, and we toured a dispensary with DA Hallinan 20 years ago to prove and to show this is not a demon drug. This helps people get off of these terrible things doctors put them on when they have
Okay,
a
all
leg
right.
amputated.
Well, I think what we're trying to do is improve the program here, so
I
let's
just would like them to
address
work
the
with what's already the law.
main- Phoebe, perhaps you can chat with her later.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you have a comment on that at all?
No,
Not at this
you know,
time.
our services are basically within the confines of what we're allowed to provide.
Right,
through our-
right. Are there federal dollars involved here? Yeah, that's a big issue, yeah. Federal dollars kind of restricts that. Okay. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public part of it, and if there's no more questions, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Supervisor Hall, seconded Supervisor Anderson. Madam Clerk?
District 4?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you, Carrie. All right. Our next item is our Chief Information Officer, Steve Monahan. This is a resolution declaring a local emergency in Nevada County. Oops, did I miss one? Oh, Trish.
Hi.
You don't look at all like Steve. All right, this is the Director of Public Works, Tricia Tolson. Resolution approving Amendment 2 to the contract between the County of Nevada and HDR Construction Control Corporation to provide on-call construction management and inspection services for various projects. Increasing the contract by $1 million for a total amount not to exceed $2,400,000, authorizing the Chair of the Board of Supervisors to execute the amendment, and directing the Auditor Controller to amend fiscal year 2017-18 Department of Public Works capital improvements budget. Another 4/5 vote required. Tricia?
Good morning. I have with me Josh Pack, our Principal Civil Engineer. He's going to give a quick presentation on this item.
Morning, Chair and members of the board. My name is Joshua Pack. I'm your Principal Civil Engineer, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about this contract and our recommended approval of Amendment Number 2. So a little bit of background on this contract. We entered into this originally with the board's approval in February 2016 for an amount not to exceed $750,000. We have done one additional amendment in March 2017. We requested and received an additional $650,000, and we're back today to ask for an additional $1 million for a total contract amount of about $2.4 million to support the capital improvement program and all the projects that we deliver. So the core of this is construction management. It's not only managing construction projects, but it's also providing inspection services that we can't provide internally. And those services don't start when the shovel hits the ground and end when the last bulldozer leaves. It starts months before, during the pre-construction phase, and then after, during post-construction and project closeout. This contract also provides what's called resident engineer services, which is that expertise that we need for specialized capital projects, bridges, and other specialty projects that we don't necessarily have the in-house expertise to provide that support. Constructability reviews, so when major projects come in, we found value in providing this review to make sure the project is biddable and deliverable as it's designed. And ultimately, this contract and HDR acts as an extension of us during the construction process, representing us and our interest when working with the contractor. So one of the questions that comes up from time to time with this contract is why we don't do this internally and why we don't staff this with an internal staff. And there's a couple, it's a great question, and there's a couple of answers why we prefer this model. First of all, the duties on a construction project are intensive, but they tend to be short in nature. The Brunswick job, for example, we had up to 4 full-time people working 24-hour shifts, but that project was about 3 weeks long. Most of our projects last anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks up to about 4 months. But as typical, we don't do most construction projects in the winter. In addition, most all of the funding that goes to this is restricted revenue. It's primarily federal grants and state grants. So we use those funds to pay that. So having 3 or 4 additional full-time people that we'd have to fund with local gas tax revenue, which is already somewhat precarious, for another 6 months doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. And then, as I mentioned previously, major bridge projects, that's just not an expertise we have with our with the staff that we currently have. So this is a model with the increase in projects we've been delivering in recent years. We felt that this was a pretty good model to meet the ebbs and flows of the needs of construction each year. So our capital program is obviously the trigger for the need for this contract. And traditionally, industry standard is about 10 to 15% of your construction costs are used for construction management. Obviously, we lean on them a little more heavily than a lot of other counties that may be much heavier staffed. And as a result, we do track at about 15% of our construction costs go to construction management. But we feel that's a pretty reasonable cost for the services we get. HDR has assisted in the delivery of about $15 million worth of projects just from the middle of 2016 through the end of this year. And I think the thing this really highlights, and not to pat ourselves on the back for a second, is we've been really successful at delivering projects the last couple of years, and we've been utilizing HDR to help assist us in that delivery. This is just a short list of projects that HDR has assisted us in the delivery. You can identify in this list there's 4 bridges. Those were all done in 2017 alone. The Brunswick emergency repairs, which were done in 3 weeks, but that was an extremely intensive project requiring a large number of staff that we didn't have that availability. We have a number of other projects this year, and then the 3 in the red are projects that they're slated to help us deliver this next coming calendar year. All of these are scheduled to be delivered or in construction by early 2019. So as a result, they've been a great partner for us. We've been working with them since the mid-2016 to deliver these capital projects. I think the other thing, too, is it gives us a lot of flexibility in delivering projects. We can help identify staffing needs based on the ebbs and flows and the changes that would happen each year in construction. The one thing I do want to highlight is we do have a new slate of projects coming in the next couple of years, and we are interested in having maybe a couple of other firms to compete with HDR. Right now, HDR has been winning the vast majority of these, so I think there's some value in having some additional folks to be able to have some different choices in delivering these projects. We'll be bringing a request for qualifications to you probably in the end of this year to help solicit for those services, to help start delivering, maybe have some additional choices beginning in 2019. So that ends my presentation, and today our recommended approval, or staff's recommended approval, is to approve amendment number 2 with HDR to provide these construction management services. And Tricia and I are here to help answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Trish. Hank?
No question.
Heidi?
Yeah, can you just, thanks for the presentation. It's very clear and succinct. Thank you for that. What was the time frame for the first original contract with HDR?
So the original contract is actually a 5-year contract, because the thing that's different with construction versus other traditional on-call or 1-year contracts is we're usually in construction July 1st. So having to negotiate contract amendments, in July, right in the smack dab middle of construction, is very difficult. So we did do an original 5-year contract, but part of the idea of this was we could come back. We didn't do a 1-year contract for $5 million. The idea was to kind of piecemeal these so the board had consistent interaction with this. So each construction year, as we went through and we had a new slate of construction projects, it was partially designed to come back with amendments so that you had an opportunity to voice your opinion on that instead of in one big plug of,
Right.
all the projects we might deliver over
Right.
a 5-year period.
So it ends in 2019 anyway.
It does. I think it ends in 2020, if memory serves. It's
Okay.
either 2019 or 2020, but we're within a year or two of that ending, but I still think there's value, and I think Tricia and I both think there's value in going back out. Not that HDR has been a great partner. They provided wonderful service, but,
Okay.
Just an opportunity to kind of, so it makes sense to go out on the taxpayer, to the benefit of the taxpayer, to go out and see if there's other services that might be better than what they do.
So would you then go out for another potential 5-year contract?
Yeah, ultimately, that would be, we
Okay.
may recommend that with the board. Again, there's value in having this certainty over multiple construction
Yeah,
years, especially
absolutely.
for larger projects.
Absolutely.
So that might be something we'd broach. We'd work with staff and senior management,
Yeah.
the county council and CEO's office, but that might be something we'd recommend and bring to the board here sometime
Okay.
next year.
Yeah, I mean, I know you need to go beyond 1 year. A 1-year contract would be ridiculous, so 5 years is, I think, makes a lot of sense. But I do appreciate that you're coming back to us each year with a list of projects and helping us see how much it's costing. And you have been satisfied with HDR to date, have you?
Yeah, very satisfied. As a matter of fact, we've had 2 audits, I believe, since by the state and federal government, and the comments we're getting back is they've never seen an agency so organized in their paperwork and their delivery of projects, and that's not by us. I'd love to take credit for that, but having HDR on board, they know that process very well, and it's been an invaluable resource to us.
Right, okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Richard?
Thank you, Chair Schofield. Josh or Trish, I presume that HDR is billing us on a T&M basis, time and materials?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, and you've reviewed their bills, and everything seems up to snuff in terms of being professional, being efficient, and adequately reflecting the costs that they incur.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And as we mentioned, we did do a cross-section of what these costs are versus what they're billing, and we continue to monitor that. We feel they're very reasonable with what the services they're providing.
Thanks very much.
Josh, or Trish, you probably weren't here at the start of this.
No, I wasn't.
Were these projects anticipated within the original amount?
Some of them were. Obviously, Brunswick wasn't anticipated. We didn't know that that was going to sink. I think the thing that's been a good problem to have is we've delivered some of these projects more quickly than even I anticipated. And I tend to be a somewhat optimistic person when it comes to delivering of projects. I think Tricia would attest to that. But I think we've even surpassed my expectations in the ability to deliver these meaningful maintenance and safety projects to our communities. So I think that also belies some of these costs is we've been delivering a lot more projects. I mean, we deliver, I think our 5-year capital program is an $82 million program. You do not see those sort of programs in Plumas or Alpine or Yuba or Sutter or any of our neighboring counties. I think based on what the size and population of and what we service, our CIP is much larger than what other rural agencies see.
Yeah.
I might add too, the original contract had a list of anticipated projects. It did say, preliminary list. So like Josh had mentioned, it was anticipated we'd be coming back to the board to amend the contract as needed for whichever projects we're able to deliver that year.
Well, did the Brunswick project impact this? It was reimbursed.
It did, yeah. I mean, and that funding will ultimately be reimbursed through the FEMA and FHWA reimbursements. But yeah, that's a project that we need to provide those services.
Yeah.
And they were in that, and that's the one thing I too want to highlight with hers is part of this process in your approval process is you get an opportunity to review and approve the capital improvement program each year. And so this project or this contract is specifically designed to deliver projects in the capital program. So you're aware of the projects. These aren't new projects, with the exception of Brunswick, which was an emergency. Yeah. You're aware of the projects that are being delivered by the approval of the CIP each year.
And the bridge projects, that was $10 million.
Yeah, just last
itself,
year.
Right?
The total amount of bridges we have off the top of my head, it's a lot more than that, actually.
Oh, is it?
As a matter of fact, in a couple of years, we'll be delivering some version of an Edwards project, final design to be determined, but that's going to be, that project will be somewhere between $5 and $10 million alone. Most of our projects, bridge projects, range in the $1.5 million to $2 million range. So, but we've delivered, like I said, 5 bridges last year and another 5 in the next 3 or 4 years, and we have a next schedule of bridges, about six bridges we're hoping to start delivering in 2023, 2024.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Trish? Is there any public comment here? All right, seeing none. If there's no other questions, I would entertain a motion.
Chair, I move the resolution.
Second.
Motion Supervisor Anderson, seconded Supervisor Miller. Madam Clerk?
District 4?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Stephen, is your turn. This is our Chief Information Officer, Stephen Monahan. This is a resolution declaring a local emergency in Nevada County due to the Sierra Mountain Aviation Airport hangar fire on April 18th, 2018. Authorizing the purchasing agent to execute contracts for Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the airport hangar fire project as necessary for site investigation, cleanup, demolition, reconstruction of the building shell, and other ancillary services without competitive bids in an amount to $550,000. Suspending the competitive bidding process for all associated contracts and directing the auditor-controller to amend fiscal year 2017-18 airport budget in the amount of $45,000 for expenses in initial purchasing agent contracts executed to secure the site and retain engineering services, which are also eligible for insurance reimbursement. Another 4/5 affirmative vote required. Steve?
Good morning, Chairman Schofield, honorable board members, Steve Monahan, your Chief Information Officer. As you mentioned, Chairman, on April 18th, a fire occurred in a county-owned aviation hangar building at our airport, leased to two private aviation businesses. The fire occurred in one of the suites, causing extensive damage to the building itself and to the operator's business. The larger tragedy, of course, is the loss of life of one of the private operator's employees and a valued community member. This item before you today is to declare a local emergency to facilitate the process and to address extensive damage to the building. The emergency is required to facilitate repairs by waiving competitive bid requirements for some of the work in order to be able to facilitate these repairs before our official rainy season begins in October 15th. As staff, as we outlined and looked at, if we used our regular public works, state mandated competitive bidding process, we would not be able to facilitate the containment of the integrity of the shell of the building, the repair to the roof, before the rainy season, which would then cause more damage into the building, sheetrock, mold, et cetera, and impact the adjacent operator who's still conducting their business in the other hangar. The work is being broken into 3 phases. Phase 1 and 2 will do the cleanup and assessment and design of the needed repairs. This is what we're requesting in the emergency declaration to bypass those competitive bidding to do those 2 phases. The conclusion of those 2 phases will have the design to be able to use our regular public works bidding procedures to bid out the work to facilitate the actual repairs to the building. To date, we've executed $45,000 in 2 contracts under the purchasing agent's authority. We estimate phase 1 and 2 to be up to $550,000, and that's the authority that we're requesting under this emergency declaration. All costs except our $25,000 deductible will be covered by insurance, and we're working very closely with the insurance and insurance adjusters on the scope of work and the reasonableness and competitiveness of this scope of work. This emergency required that I come back to you and provide you an update at every board meeting. Typically, it's 30 days for emergency, but under this situation, I'll have to come back to you every board meeting and give you an update on where we're at with this project and the emergency declaration. And in conclusion, I'd just like to thank, this has been a real team process, coming together with our risk management staff, county council spent a lot of time, auditor, CEO staff, and of course my IGS staff. I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Steve. Heidi? No question? Hank? Richard?
So Steve, with a reconstruction process that's expected to take 6.5 to 8.5 months, we'll be seeing you another 12 to 17 times, it sounds like.
Yes, sir.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Dan? Is there any public comment on this? Okay, seeing none, entertain a resolution or a motion.
So moved.
Motion Supervisor Miller,
Second.
seconded Supervisor Weston. Madam Clerk?
District 4?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, the next item is the clerk of the board. I think we're going to have our own Jeff Thornsby on this. This is a resolution endorsing and certifying the Nevada County Historical Landmarks Commission designation of the Truckee Memorial Masonic Arch located at 10142 Jaboom Street, Truckee, California, as a Nevada County Historical Landmark. Bernie, would you and Barbara wish to come up front here? Jaboom. Jeff, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Chair Schofield. Jeff Thorsby, your analyst for the board. I want to welcome Bernie Zimmerman, Chair of the Historical Landmarks Commission, and Barbara Zerwinski from the Truckee Donor Historical Society, who can talk a little bit about this designation. I will just provide a little input. The application was initially submitted to the Historical Landmarks Commission on February 22nd to designate the Memorial Masonic Arch as a historical landmark. The commission reviewed the application and unanimously approved that on April 20th and then submitted a letter requesting for consideration for this board. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over.
I'm Barbara Serwinski, and I'm the representative to the Nevada County Landmarks Commission from District 5. Richard Anderson is our supervisor. And I'm here just to ask and thank you for the support of making this a historical designation for Truckee, for the Truckee Memorial Masonic Arch. And it has an interesting history, and it's a lot of interesting things that will bring to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Bernie?
Well, I'll echo Barbara's thanks. I also wanted to mention a couple of other things. Following up on a comment by Supervisor Anderson at the budget meeting about where our landmarks are located, I can inform the board that there are just over 200 historical landmarks in Nevada County, and just over 50 of them are in the greater Truckee or East County area. And if you approve this one, you'll be adding one. It'll be our newest. And also, our next plaque will be going up in that area. On June 9th, there will be a ceremony in the Donner State Park commemorating the 100th anniversary of the dedication of the Pioneer Monument, which is sometimes called the Donner Monument, but don't tell that to the folks on the National Register. They get upset. I understand that Supervisor Anderson will be at the ceremony, and I would hope the rest of you will attend. There's going to be lots of activities. And the commission will be unveiling a commemorative plaque, which will look like this. I can pass it up if you want to see it more closely, but it's got our logo, and then the text will read, First Nevada County Historical Landmark. The Nevada County Historical Landmarks Commission dedicated this plaque to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the first two recorded historical landmark plaques in Nevada County, which were placed on the Pioneer Monument on June 6, 1918. We were hoping it would be installed at the same time, but construction delays caused by the state means that it'll take a while. But once they put up, they're constructing a retaining wall of some kind, this will go up. So unless there are any questions, again, I'll thank you for your effort in supporting our work.
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you, Barbara. Richard?
Chair Schofield, no questions, but thank you to Bernie and to Barbara for the work they do and for the work of the commission. It's important for Nevada County to recognize our historical heritage, and you're doing a wonderful job doing so.
Barbara, what's the origin of the name Jaboom?
Probably comes, there's a Jaboom Street also in Sacramento. And it's probably when the ships came in during the gold rush and they abandoned them and they fell over into the river, and the booms from the ships is the name that came about.
How'd that end up in Truckee?
Pardon?
How did that end up in Truckee?
Probably from overindulgence of some nature along that street.
Okay.
There were often more saloons than there were people in Truckee for a while.
Uh-huh. Now you complain?
I'm not complaining about that.
Richard came after that.
But perhaps someone abandoned a rowboat and on Trout Creek, who knows?
Heidi? Bernie, I want to remind, it's Nevada.
I'm sorry?
It's Nevada.
Oh, what am I saying, Nevada?
Nevada.
Sorry.
June 9th is the
Yes.
the
Yes.
statue.
And I do believe Bernie's on the agenda too.
And so what is the date of the dedication of the arch?
That's to be determined yet.
Oh, okay. Okay. So right now we're looking
Won't
at...
happen until you approve it, though.
Okay, all right. Well, why don't we see if we can get that done? Is there any public comments on this? All right. Seeing none.
So moved.
Motion Supervisor Weston, seconded Supervisor Anderson. Madam Clerk?
District 4?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes. There you go. You're on your way. Bernie,
Thank you
Barbara,
very much.
thank you for all the work that you do on the commission, too.
Sorry, Richard, didn't mean to take the
It's okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
We're in a hurry to go to closed session, obviously.
All right, the next agenda item is the addendum item. And this is a motion of the Board of Supervisors finding that there is a need for immediate action to authorize a letter of support urging the state of California to provide an additional $2.8 million in state funding for the Bridgeport Bridge Restoration Project, and that the need for this action came to the attention of the county subsequent to the posting of the May 22nd, 2018 agenda, and adding item 28B to the agenda. And we do need a 4/5 vote for this. Maybe it's a little late for this since we already put it on the agenda. Does this require a motion at this time, or do we want to do a motion with the letter also?
There are two motions that the board will have to make. The first one is a motion to place it on the agenda. So even though you have an item, an agenda before you, the second item, 28B, is not actually on your agenda yet. So the
Okay.
first step is a 4/5 vote to place it on the agenda. The second step is to discuss it and then take action if appropriate.
Okay.
So I'll move to put it on the agenda.
Motion Weston,
I'll second that.
seconded Supervisor Hall. Madam Clerk?
District
Oh,
4?
I should ask, is there any public comment on this? Okay, and I'll ask again on the item also.
Mr. Chair, you might want just a brief explanation as to why there's an emergency and a need to put it on the agenda today. So I think...
All right. Mr. Thornsby?
Jeff Thorsby, Administrative Analyst for the Board of Supervisors Office. Yes, yesterday the county was informed, and Supervisor Hank Weston was informed that a budget shortfall is existing for the Bridgeport Bridge Restoration Project. And because of the shortfall, which is approximately $2.8 million, the California, the state budgeting process is well underway, and any actions of this board to encourage to fill that funding gap would need to be submitted to the state before your next regularly scheduled meeting. So that's the reason for the urgency and to place it on the matter today versus the next regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay. I do have a motion and I have a second. Supervisor Weston's and Supervisor Hall seconded. Any questions? Okay, this is a motion to add it to the agenda, Madam Clerk.
District 4?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes. All right, so this next one is a motion authorizing the Chair of the Board of Supervisors to send a letter or letters of support urging the State of California to provide an additional $2.8 million in state funding for the Bridgeport Bridge Restoration Project. Supervisor Weston?
Okay, so we were notified yesterday that that we're short in funding, and just quickly, it's in the staff letter, but just they went out to bid. They had one bid, and they went. That wasn't sufficient for Parks and Recreation, so they went back, rescoped the project a little bit, went back out, got 3 bids. The third bid, or one of the bids, was accepted. Good company, vetted. The only thing is, there's a 20% contingency on this project because there's so much that's unknown once they take the bridge out. They don't know what they're going to find in there. So that brings the cost to $6.2 million roughly. There was originally 4.2. They spent 900,000. They had 3.4 left. So from the bid, it's for construction, it's short 2.8. The legislature is going through their last fixes for the budget. We don't. We are in the process of trying to find out who do we contact. We have our advocate group, the county advocacy group is checking. We're dealing with DPR. There's a meeting this afternoon. I contacted Assemblyman Dolly, try to find out how we get into the process to try and get the budget before it goes final to the governor and get this money in there. So what this is asking is just the board to authorize the chair to sign the letter once we find out who is going to and how we make that contact. And it very well may be that it's impossible, but we're going to try our best to try and generate the support.
Eddie? No? Dan? Richard?
No questions.
And just so you know, if it doesn't make it, the bid from this company is good till October. If they go through their normal funding process, we wouldn't see funding for this until we saw the governor's budget in January of 2019 to pick up the 2.8 million. So therefore, the bid is no longer good. So we have to start the whole process over again. And because there's lots of construction, everybody's working, the price will probably go up at the next go-round. So we're trying to encourage the legislature to put the funding in now based on this bid, because it definitely will probably go up again.
Any public comment? All right. Seeing none, any other questions from the board? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Supervisor Weston, seconded Supervisor Hall. Madam Clerk?
District 4?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes. All right. At this time, we will be going into a closed session. Madam Counselor, would you like to read us in?
We have 2 sets of closed sessions today. The first is pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1. County Council is requesting a closed session to discuss the following existing litigation case, Evans et al. Versus County of Nevada, Nevada County Superior Court, case number CU 15-081064. And the second is pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8. The Board of Supervisors desires to hold closed sessions regarding real property negotiations. The negotiators for the county are Tricia Tillotson, Public Works Director, and Yolanda Matrange, Vendor Rosenthal, Inc., the negotiators for the property owners are unknown at this time. Items under negotiation concern the price and terms of payment for a portion of each of the following properties and the property interest to be obtained. The properties are 10069 Comby Road, Grass Valley, California, 95949. Assessor's parcel number 57-260-04. The next one, 10045 Comby Road, Grass Valley, California, 95949. Assessor's parcel number 57-26018. The third property is 10005 Comby Road, also in Grass Valley. Assessor's parcel number 57-260-02. And the fourth parcel is 10021 Comby Road in Grass Valley. Assessor's parcel number 57-260-01.
Thank you, Counselor. We will be back for your 11 o'clock session. Would you
Nothing-
please read us in?
Uh,
Or
Nothing
out?
occurred, nothing occurred in closed session, which is required to be reported out by law.
Okay, at this time, we will recess until 11 o'clock with our next agenda item. Okay, we'll reconvene this regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors of Nevada County, May 22nd, 2018. This next agenda item is Allison Barrett Green, our County Counsel, and Sean Powers, Community Development Agency Director, and this is to introduce, waive further reading, and adopt an emergency ordinance amending subsection G-4 5.4.E.3 of Chapter 4 of the subsection G454.02, Article 5 of Chapter 4 of the Nevada County General Code regarding temporary commercial cannabis permits. And remind folks that at our last session, it was determined that we would issue temporary permits. This is something that was fairly new going into our last session. We didn't know if this would be permitted or not. So staff has come up with the rules and an ordinance that would make this work. And I just want to remind everybody, this is what we're talking about, is the issuance of commercial permits. Not the overall ordinance that we've been worked on in the past. What we will do is I'll have staff make presentation, I'll have the board ask questions of the staff, and then I'll ask for public comment. And when public comment is done, I'll bring it back to the board for further questions and then a vote from there. Okay, with that I'll turn it over to Sean, Amanda, Craig. Or you, Allison.
I was going to give the introduction that you just gave, so thank you very much. I will turn it over to Amanda and Sean.
Thank you very much, Chair Schofield and members of the board. We are, as Chair Schofield indicated here, to discuss the temporary medical cannabis cultivation permit urgency ordinance. It's a mouthful. We were given instruction, fairly specific instruction and direction from the board to provide a method by which we could issue temporary permits to enable some of the growers to get into the commercial market. Currently, the state regulations have a temporary licensing structure with an initial term of 120 days. They do provide for 90-day extensions with a completed state application. Originally, this program expired on January 1st, 2019, but was just a couple of days ago extended to July 1st, 2019. So the emergency regulations are still in effect through the end of June of next year. The direction from the board on May 1st was to create a temporary urgency amendment, essentially to allow for temporary licenses or permits in the AG, AE, and FR zones only, that the commercial zones and grow sizes should comply with the existing ordinance limitations. So from 6 plants to 300 square feet on up to 25 plants for a total of 1,000 square feet. And this does include the 6 plants for personal use. This ordinance would be amending sections 5.4E3, which is the provision that prohibited commercial cannabis activity. So that would be amended to permit limited commercial cannabis activity. It also adds section G4 5.40, which provides for the specific regulations and permitting process related to the temporary permits. So the purpose of the amendments is to align with the board direction to create the process for temporary permits, but also to be consistent with the existing state temporary licensing permit, to add the permit process as well as other oversight for the permit process and permits that are issued, and allow for commercial cultivation while also trying to reduce the risk of any CEQA challenge. Currently, what we're proposing is to allow for commercial cannabis cultivations in the AG, AE, and FR zones only. We have created a rather abbreviated permitting process to allow for temporary medical commercial cannabis cultivation permit issues. This is not the lengthy state application or anywhere near what we were proposing for the long-term permanent regulations for Nevada County. This would help expedite the process and get people into the system faster. We're also proposing to allow, similar to the long-term regulations we proposed, allow for the transport of the cultivators' own cannabis off their own site if they have the proper state license to do so. So that's similar distributor license with the self-transport of their own cannabis off their own site. any commercial cannabis activity that they would be engaged in here in Nevada County under our temporary process would also require that they possess a appropriate state license for the same activity prior to the commencement of any commercial cannabis activity. This also requires the adherence to all other provisions of the existing ordinance. So we're only adding a provision and amending that one, but all other provisions of the existing ordinance, such as setbacks, et cetera, would still apply to the commercial activity. We're proposing to allow for 60 days to correct existing code violations related to structures that are not being used for cannabis activities. This 60-day correction provision would not apply to any health and safety violations, and it would not apply to new construction, so just existing structures on the property, similar to what we proposed in the long-term regulations. This would require an inspection within 30 days of the issuance of the temporary medical commercial cannabis permit, and or upon request by the CDA director or their designees or an enforcing officer to ensure that they're complying with the provisions of the permit that's being issued and as well as the rest of the ordinance. The urgency ordinance that has been provided to you in the packet also sets forth fairly specific denial and suspension and revocation criteria for the temporary permits. There's no appeal process, mainly based on the fact that this is a very short-term permitting process, so we're not looking at having a lengthy appeal process. Currently, in the ordinance before you, we have it expiring on December 31st, and this was essentially to coincide with the current with the pre-existing expiration date of the state emergency regulations. That has been kicked out, like I said, until June 30th of 2019. The reason for this, we did want the temporary licensing process and permitting process to align with the state regulations. We have a very abbreviated permitting process, much like the state's temporary licensing process is very abbreviated. So we do not have the temporary permitting process to be any guarantee of local authorization for the state's annual license. The state's annual licensing process is much more robust, so we'd wanted an apples to apples. In other words, the temporary abbreviated system to go along with the state's abbreviated system. We do not have our robust analysis process yet in place. That's with the long-term regulations. So wouldn't necessarily coincide with what the state was doing on their annual permit. It's also very likely that our ordinance is going to change in the middle of any annual permit that they would have, so our local authorization wouldn't necessarily coincide with what they're trying to do under the state annual permit. So we're making a recommendation that the temporary permitting process apply only to the temporary licensing for the state and not constitute local authorization for the annual state licensing permit. In this urgency ordinance, we are claiming a CEQA exemption. We do not have any studies as to the impact of adding the commercial aspect to our current ordinance, but this we consider as a relatively low risk. This is a minor change, adding the commercial given the limited grow sizes and the temporary nature of the permitting process. We're not increasing any grow sizes, so the cumulative aspect of it shouldn't be too much of a risk factor for CEQA. Our current existing ordinance hasn't been challenged as far as the grow sizes, so we feel that this is a fairly strong exemption claim for CEQA. We are proposing this as an urgency ordinance, and this is to enable the growers in the local community to participate in the state process for this particular grow season. There has obviously been some expressed interest in doing so. Our long-term process is not going to be ready, obviously, for this grow season until early next year with our EIR process that's underway. So in order to allow them to engage in the state commercial process for this grow season, we would have to make this an urgency ordinance situation. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Craig Griesbach, who's going to go through the specifics of the permitting process.
Good morning, Chair Schofield, members of the board. For the record, Craig Griesbach, Director of Building for Nevada County. The temporary cannabis permitting process that's being proposed is substantially similar to other land use review and permitting processes that we currently have in place. The Community Development Agency will be the lead agency completing any permitting activities. The permit process will be a three-stage process. This includes application, plan review, and a compliance inspection. Once a complete application is submitted, the project will be routed to a singular department for review. Staff will be assigned to process applications and reviews once they are submitted. When a project review is completed and determined to meet all permitting requirements, the permit will be issued. Following permit issuance, a compliance inspection will be conducted within 30 days of that issuance. This inspection will be to verify that all conditions of the permit have been reviewed and meet all of the conditions of that permit, as well as the site plan that was reviewed matches all site conditions. Applications will be submitted on an appointment-based system only. This will help us not to substantially use some of our existing customers, programs, and services that we provide. We can still operate as per normal conditions. We're tentatively proposing to allow customers to start scheduling application submittal appointments as soon as June 6th. Appointments will be scheduled on a first-come, first-served basis and can be conducted in person, or via phone, or email. Staff are diligently working on the application packet information and forms so we can get them released prior to the appointment-based system so they can know what they're going to need to submit for a complete application. Application submittals could start as soon as June 20th. Applications shall be submitted, we put originally by October 1st when we were thinking the December cutoff date, but that could be revised if that date is moved to allow adequate time for permit processing review and the on-site compliance inspection prior to the expiration date of the actual permits. The minimum fee that is being proposed is to provide full cost recovery for the services provided by county staff. This minimum fee being proposed is $542.49. That would be due at time of the application submittal. This fee would cover initial staff time to process permits, complete project plan reviews, conduct site compliance inspections, and archive permit documents. Any additional time needed to complete permit-related activities we would bill at an hourly rate that was in effect at time that service is provided. These fees are based on currently established and approved county fee schedules that already exist today. These proposed fees will be reviewed by, or have been reviewed by the Nevada County User Fee Review Group on May 17th and will be presented in the CDA user fee schedules at the June 5th board meeting. This fee would be effective immediately upon adoption of the fee schedules. Existing staff, as well as the use of existing established consultants, are planned to be used to complete all permit-related activities. That concludes our presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Let me ask a question?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Supervisor Weston.
Something just comes to my mind. Permit issued, then inspection. That almost seems counterproductive. I mean, it would seem to me you would want to go inspect it before you give the permit, because if you give them the permit and then you get out there and you find it doesn't meet it, you're going to take the permit away? You've already given it to them.
The way we plan on the permit working, and this is similar to other processes that we have in place, we issue a permit, then we verify compliance with whatever the approved documents that they have, so their approved site plan. The permit would have, right now, we're planning on, we would issue the permit, and there would be a line item on that permit to be signed by the authorized representative. Once it's signed by the authorized representative, the permit would be valid. So essentially, this is how we do building permits and several other permits. So we're trying to make it as stylistically the same.
Okay. Then the next question I have is the 60-day, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th bullet point. It must apply for permits to correct existing code violations on the parcel prior to the issuance of the temporary permit and commencement of commercial cultivation, and must correct the violation within 60 days. We don't even require that now on regular violations. So why the 60 days? I mean, as long as they're going forward to make the corrections, less health and safety, immediate health and safety issues, why wouldn't they have as much time to get themselves, to get it up to code?
But this is pretty similar to how we handle other permits as well. So you come in to submit a building permit and you have an unpermitted swimming pool, for example. We require that you at least start the process prior to releasing a permit, say for a house or something like that. So we don't have a 60-day marker in our current policy related to that, but we do that substantially similar. Something we could do is, as long as all the violations or anything related to the actual grow area and there wasn't any fire life safety issues on the site, we could issue them like a condition of approval that prior to obtaining a permanent license or something like that, once we have that in place, they have those violations abated. We could choose something like that. I think that could meet the intent of what we're trying to get at.
Okay. Then I guess the other part is, I mean, you've heard 2 or 3 times, are we going to change our expiration date to match the state's?
I think at this time that would be our recommendation, is to flow with the new dates, to have it expire on June 30th of 2019 to expire at the same time as states.
Supervisor Weston, and the great fluidity of the situation, we release our agenda on Thursday, and much surprise to us, the state releases substantial revisions to their regulations on Friday. You can imagine that creates quite a challenge for us.
Okay.
Dan, you had a question?
Yeah, so the timeline here, when the permit's issued, when is the first date that growers can plant cannabis?
So once they have an approved valid permit and they have a state license, then they would be approved to complete cultivation activities on site.
So,
Yes, the state requires that they would have a state license to conduct any commercial activity, so that would be a requirement.
Before they can plant anything?
Before they can engage in commercial cannabis activity, yes.
Sure. No questions?
Thank you. I have a couple questions. I had also the extension question, so I'm glad we're doing that. And I'll start with the easy stuff. So, Craig, in terms of the timeline for permitting, we haven't made a commitment by staff as to how quickly we'll turn around a permit. Do we have a guideline on that?
So we've thought about this a little bit. Obviously, this is going to depend on how many we receive. We have a couple different plans in place, and essentially we're building a program from scratch right now. So we're building software and doing all these different things. So what I'm thinking is these timelines that I presented forward to you will be the timelines that we're planning on keeping to. Once they submit, I would like to hit a milestone of reviewing those and either having approval or comments that they need to address within 2 weeks. So that's pretty similar to our other processes, and I think that's pretty quick.
Okay, thank you. Great. So I want to follow up on Dan's question about the need to so we have we're going to issue a temporary permit, then we're going to need folks to go and apply for a state permit. And I know we want to make sure that they're actually going to apply for a state permit and do their due diligence that way. But I think there's going to be a problem if we're kind of putting them in a catch-22 if we're saying, well, you can't go for the state permit till you get the temporary permit, and then you just can't start growing until you get the state permit. And I'm worried that we're actually going to defeat the purpose of this if we require them to wait that long. So can we modify that so that we can be affirmed that they are applying for the state permit, and once they applied for it, they can move, because they have no control over how long the state's going to take to turn that around.
Supervisor Hall, a grower at any time can apply for a state permit. The turnaround times with the state are governed by what the applicant submits, but anytime anybody does apply for a state permit, those come into CDA as a request for local authorization, even on the temp, and we get those. And so for any permits that we'll issue, we can cross-check those with any inquiries we get from the state. And I am making friends at the state organization, so we have the contacts there to cross-check the list to make sure things are being picked up on both sides.
So to follow up on that, can we then allow them to start growing once we've been notified by the state that they have applied for the state permit?
Well, they would need both of our local permit and the state permit together to do that, but they can start either one at any time that they choose.
I think the issue that I'm trying to get at is the time that it might take for them the whole idea of this ordinance is to allow them to get started this year. Did you want to?
Supervisor Hall, if I might just help a little bit. The state, they would be in violation of the state law if they tried to commercially cultivate without a state license. So while I can understand and appreciate the time it might take to get a state license, they actually can't cultivate without a state license, whether or not they get that before or after, yeah, whether or not they've applied before or after we issue our local authorization. So that's, I think, what staff is trying to tell you.
Right, I understand that, but they can't actually get the state license until they've gotten our temporary license, which is still a
Yep.
month or two out now, a month and a half out, right? So how are we, I mean, I understand the concern, but the idea is to allow them to start growing this year. Otherwise, we're kind of defeating the purpose.
Yeah, Ed, I think what we're looking at, Heidi, is I think we're looking at, can they apply for the state license concurrently with the local license, which might shorten that time frame down for them so that, you know, even though they don't have the local permit, they can still apply for the state, and then the cross-check is done. It just depends on how long it takes for the county to process that permit. You see?
Right.
Yeah,
I think, well, I'll be interested in hearing the comments. I think that there still is going to be an issue of timing, so let's see what the public says about that. If I could, just one or two more questions at the most. Are we somehow precluding them from applying for an annual license because this is a temporary urgency ordinance license?
They're not precluded from applying for a state license. What would not be allowed under this ordinance is that the temporary permit that we issue could not be used as local authorization for the state annual license. Our standards of assessment are completely different. It's very abbreviated under the temporary system. Our analysis of how this is working with CEQA and other issues and impacts is based upon the fact this is a short-term temporary situation. Much like the state did with their own temporary licenses, it's a very abbreviated application process. The annual permitting process is much more robust, the analysis is more robust, and we would need that same robust analysis for that, and so that's the concern about using the temporary permits for that.
And that would argue for us for some urgency to get the final ordinance in place too, so they could have a process for an annual permit next year, is that right?
Yes, absolutely, and extending this through next June would also help bridge some of that gap for them as well.
Okay. And then my last question would be, there was a request that in a letter that came in for us to switch from plant count to square feet, and I'm concerned that if that's something we can do, if that's minor enough to continue to do in this ordinance without having to bring it back.
Are you speaking in terms of expanding the square footage outside, or?
No, using square footage rather than plant count.
We do have some square footage already built into our current ordinance. So for instance, on the higher acreages, you can have 25 plants total on the property with a combination of indoor or outdoors, but the outdoor square footage is limited to 1,000 square feet. So there is that currently built in. If we mess too much around with the actual grow sizes, we're looking at some CEQA analyses that has not taken place for purposes of this ordinance.
Okay. I think that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
How does this work in conjunction with the existing emergency ordinance that we have? They're the same numbers, right?
Yeah, so the grow sizes are identical for the zones that we're talking about. The only amendments we're making is to allow for commercial cannabis activity of the same grow sizes in the ag, the AG, AE, and FR zones. So those are the only changes that we're making. Everything else remains the same. And that's for purposes of not inciting a CEQA challenge.
So nothing prohibits them from planting under the old emergency ordinance?
They can certainly, for personal use, the ordinance is still in effect for purposes of growing. For purposes of commercial activity, they would require the permit and state licenses.
But if they began they began by planting for their own personal use and then it became commercial.
If they wanted to move that product into the commercial market, they would need the permits and license.
Okay. Hank?
I have one question, another question. The old ordinance, if I remember correctly, and if I'm wrong, then you can point it out, because I'm sometimes wrong, but I remember, I thought, that RA Rural 5 to 10, we allowed growth on the old ordinance.
We do currently allow for some personal grow on the old ordinance. Board direction from the last meeting and the item that's agendized today is only involving the AG, AE, and FR zones for commercial purposes.
Okay, so I guess my question is if we're using the old ordinance and we had approved under the old ordinance, RA rural 5 to 10 growing authorization. How can we eliminate that since we're basing everything on the old ordinance?
Because the only provisions that are currently amended are the provisions for C for the commercial cannabis to allow only under the section O, which is added, and that only permits growing in the AG, AE, and FR zones. So the other provisions related to the RA zones in the old ordinance are for personal use only at this point.
Okay.
Okay. Sure, Richard.
Thank you, Chair Schofield. Just to follow up your question, when you say growing for personal use under the current ordinance, do you mean the 6-plant personal use as defined by Prop 64, or are we looking at the 25 plants, 1,000 square foot coverage as being personal use if they're not designated as a commercial grow when they start to plant?
Supervisor Anderson, currently those grow sizes are for personal use. In other words, they're not to be moved into the commercial market at this point. We do not allow for commercial cannabis activities in those areas. So we have not limited the grow sizes to 6 plants. They were for personal use. This was before, of course, the state regulations came out. The only commercial cannabis activity we're allowing are in the AG, AE, and FR zones. The remainder would be for personal use, not to enter the commercial market.
So if I understand this correctly, what you're saying is, or what you're implying is that they can plant, for example, 25 plants for personal use, apply for the permit, and that grow is in place, or that grow is taking place as the permits are being reviewed by both the county and by the state. So theoretically, they'll be up and running with and making the grow season in time, I presume. If we simply consider these grows initially as personal grows, and then they transform into commercial grows at some later point in time during the permit processing, during the permit process.
For the ag zones, for the RA, they would not be permitted.
Right. It's the AG, AE, and FR zones.
Correct. They would have to comply. Their grow would have to comply with the current permitting, the regulations under the urgency ordinance in order to be permitted. So there would be those compliance checks. But as of now, we don't have anything precluding the planting for personal grow to transform into commercial at this point in those zones.
Okay, thank you.
And the emergency ordinance would be in effect until we vote in the new ordinance.
Currently, we would have the expiration of the permitting process for June 30th, 2019, absent any extension or the enactment of the long-term.
No,
This
I'm
would
talking
expire.
about our current existing ordinance.
That's correct.
It would sunset upon the approval of the new ordinance that we've been looking at.
We don't have a
that
sunset.
CEQA is dealing with currently.
It would have to be repealed and with the new long-term ordinance put in place.
Okay, okay. All right, is there any other questions from here? Well, let's go on into public comment. And if you would, just come forward, give us your name, and you have 3 minutes. Hi, Gary. I don't know. You spoke earlier. I don't know if this is fair or not.
Yeah, I was a little out of turn there, I think. Gary Baker, South County resident, but I want to specifically just deal with this RA rural issue here.
Okay, well, that isn't the issue. That is not the issue. We're talking about the licensing, the permitting, okay? And you've already spoke on this RA issue, okay?
The omission of the RA from the urgency zoning is specifically what I wanted to deal with.
I know that, and you spoke on it this morning, and I allowed you to do that. Are you going to do it again?
No, this morning I spoke about a much broader issue here with the...
Sounded like RA to me. Go ahead, Gary. We're wasting time.
The RA, we have 3 designations, residential, estate, and rural. And often in these discussions, the RA gets lumped into all 3 of these categories, of which 2 of them, perhaps could be more considered the residential area. But the rural areas are similar to the ag. And the the uses that are allowed on these rural properties are distinguished from what's allowed on our traditional residential lot. And I think that's the reason that they've been included in the past in these cannabis regulations. There's not that many RA rural lots, especially over the 5-acre minimum. But there are a lot of these lots, tucked away in little areas throughout the county that have traditionally grown cannabis, much like the ag lots. And to preclude them is why I keep addressing this. I'm just not sure it makes sense because they're really not much different from the agricultural lots. When you can put a cemetery on your property or a winery or a fruit stand, it really doesn't mean that those uses would actually go there, but those are allowed uses which are really not residential in nature. And I'm just concerned that we keep overlooking the fact that it's not like these are new grows. These are existing facilities that where people have invested a lot of time and money and to participate in this market, and they've been discarded. CAG did not discard them. CAG recommended that the RA rural sites should be included in a regulated cannabis market. So I'm just asking this board again to consider this, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gary.
Good day. My name is Diana Gamza, and I'm the Executive Director for the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance. The Nevada County Cannabis Alliance would like to acknowledge the efforts of the Board of Supervisors in providing direction to set up a system that would allow cultivators the opportunity to transition to the regulated market this summer. Directing staff to amend the urgency ordinance to allow for access to the legal market through temp licenses represents a symbolic move towards creating collaborative policy that takes both the needs of the industry and our community at large into consideration. We understand this was a compromise and an expression of goodwill by the board. However, after a careful review of the urgency ordinance with our staff, our advisors, legal experts, and our membership, we have determined that the urgency ordinance as presented by county staff is overly restrictive and compliance will be near impossible to achieve. While we see fundamental flaws with the ordinance as presented to you today, we believe that several specific key changes can be made to continue with the intent of your direction to create a pathway for farmers to gain access to the legal market this summer. First, remove the language that states the validity of temporary permits are conditioned upon the applicant obtaining approval from the state prior to commencement of any commercial cannabis activity. Planting season is now. By June 20th, plants will be in the ground. This language inclusion is a deal breaker. The timing of agriculture will not meet the needs of this ordinance. I hear the feedback from Amanda. We have actually received different feedback from state regulators that during this transition period, plants can be in the ground and you can go on and get your state temp during this transition. So a review of that would be helpful, or a second look at that. Second, remove the language that states issuance of temporary permits will not constitute local authorization for purpose of obtaining a permanent state license. We acknowledge that the county staff would like to ensure approved cultivators maintain compliance with the permanent regulations once they are complete. And as it is written, these mechanisms exist under Section 3, subsection O7H of the ordinance, which says that a temporary permit holder must be in compliance of local and state regs. Third, please direct staff to change the plant count to square footage equivalents. For example, 16 plants, 1,600 square feet, 18 plants, 1,800, and 25, 2,500 square feet. Currently, the economic plausibility of our smaller license types, the cottage, is questionable, and anything less than 25 plants or 2,500 square feet is even more so. However, cultivation techniques based on square footage practices help increase the viability and the potential to survive in the extremely competitive regulated marketplace. Lastly, as it stands, setbacks of the current ordinance are highly restrictive and would also create a situation where gardens will potentially have to be relocated next year, incurring further expenses from our farmers. We request that setbacks mirror the draft ordinance and be placed at 100 foot from property lines. I want to also mention that non-remuneration was not mentioned in this updated urgency ordinance. In addition, we continue to advocate for those that are on the residential agriculture zones, and the exclusion of that was surprising to us as well. If these amendments were to be adopted, we believe this ordinance would fall more in alignment with the intent of the board and create a pathway for a handful of farmers to enter the legal market this summer. While we truly see the temporary permitting program as a good faith effort on your part, it will be very difficult to comply with the ordinance as it has been presented to you today. And as an organization, we find ourselves in a challenging situation because it will be difficult for us to encourage membership to enter a system that is not feasible or potentially damaging to their futures, or just not workable based on how it was written. We urge the board to adopt the ordinance with amendments we have suggested to truly follow the intent of creating a realistic and accessible pathway for farmers. We believe that the board has the will and sees the benefit of shifting farmers from the unregulated market into the regulated, and for that it's truly appreciated. We hope that you can direct staff to address these holes in the urgency ordinance and adopt the ordinance so we can follow the suggested timeline with the application opening on the 20th of June. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Brad?
Good morning. My name is Brad P. Simer. I'm a resident of both North San Juan as well as Alta Sierra. I also want to remind that in the past we've had 100 square feet per plant. Okay. One of the problems that we have with the commercial cannabis market right now is that there is so much product out there that doesn't meet health or safety guidelines. What I'm talking about is problematic issues with molds, fungus, things like those. When plants are planted too close together, those issues are abundant. Therefore, I'm asking that we go back to the 100 square foot per plant, 2,500 square feet, because putting 25 plants in 1,000 square feet is just problematic. You're going to end up with material that won't work either in the health or for the safety of the people involved. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Hello, Patricia Smith. I live in District 4. I would like to commend the board on your progress on adopting a commercial cannabis permitting system. However, I don't believe this temporary ordinance is what you've instructed county staff to produce. Sean Powers and Allison Barrett Green have stated their objections to the temporary permits, so I believe they have intentionally included poison pills to render this ordinance meaningless. As we've discussed, Section 3, subsection 1G states that the temporary permit is not valid without a state license, while Section 3, subsection 5 states that a temporary permit does not constitute the local authority that is necessary to get the state license, a deliberate catch-22. That alone would render this ordinance invalid, but even if that section did not exist, the growth season will be too far along to legally grow this season by the time all the requirements are met. And if that weren't enough, the ordinance was set to expire at the end of the year, right when the product was ready to take to market. Thankfully, you're talking about adjusting that. As the Community Development Agency Director, Sean Powers has acted in bad faith. From the start of the CAG process, his bias against cannabis has been clearly evident. For his department alone to determine who qualifies for a permit is preposterous. Sean repeatedly withheld or gave out misleading information and then failed to correct erroneous information even to this board. Despite the hundreds of thousands of dollars we have wasted on the CAG committee process, surveys and phone polls that all support a more liberal commercial cannabis policy, Sean and County Council continue to stall, obstruct, and delay the process. I also marvel at how quickly county staff can draft a ban, but after all this time they have failed to produce a workable commercial ordinance. How is it that Nevada City, with its limited staff and resources, has already started issuing a spectrum
of real commercial licenses. That we are so far behind them can only be chalked up to incompetence or the staff's willful disregard of the board and the public's wishes. Based upon what I heard this board direct county staff to do at the last meeting, I call upon you to reject this ordinance, to hold Sean Powers and Allison Barrett Green in contempt for wasting your time and our money. Turn the ordinance drafting process over to the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance, of which I am not a part, and their legal counsel. And I request that the board place their finished product on the ballot in November so our citizens can vote on this important decision. The Alliance has the knowledge...
Thank you, Patricia. Your time is up, and I must say I'm a bit offended with your personal...
Well, I'm offended by this...
Thank you, Patricia. Your time is up. Sir, you're next.
Good afternoon. My name is Basil McMahon. I'm a resident of District 2. I just want to keep my comments really brief, and it's been spoken to briefly by previous speakers, but allow me to explain this more clearly. From my understanding, the way it was presented by county staff, this temporary permit would provide the authorization to apply for a temporary state license, but it would not be the sufficient grounds to be able to apply for a full annual state license. The problem is that a temporary state license is only valid for 120 days. The 90-day potential extension is only granted to applicants who submit a full and complete annual state license application, which means that this temporary authorization is only valid for 120 days. So the only way that you might manage to be able to obtain this local authorization and stay in compliance throughout the year would be to wait until 120 days before the end of the year, which I don't think is in the spirit of the intent of this ordinance and the goals that you have sought to achieve with it. So it only came to my attention while I was sitting there, and I wish that I had a constructive suggestion for how to change that. I understand county staff's perspective is that because a CEQA analysis hasn't been conducted, that this temporary authorization shouldn't be sufficient grounds to obtain a full annual license, but it's one of the many ways in which you may find this ordinance untenable. It may be just not feasible for a well-meaning cultivator to obtain this local authorization and then stay in compliance for the rest of the year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Basil. And I think we're working on this, and I think we're just trying to do it in conjunction with the state rules. Am I correct?
You are correct.
Yes, thank you.
There are challenges.
Mark?
Good morning, Mark Johnson. I and the majority of the voting constituents are finding problems understanding your willingness to exclude entirely RA properties from the cannabis cultivation ordinance when the county's own documents state RA equals residential agricultural. When transfers occur of real property located in AG, AE, RA, and FR zoning districts, the seller shall ensure that disclosure statement containing substantially the following language is provided. And this says the County of Nevada recognizes and supports the right to farm agricultural lands in a manner consistent with accepted customs and standards. Residents on or near agricultural lands should be prepared to accept some inconveniences or discomforts with agricultural operations, including timber harvesting, falling and removal, including but not limited to noise, odors, fumes, dust, operation machinery, et cetera, et cetera. So spraying of pesticides, storing of manure. The Nevada County Code Article 1 describes nuisance. No existing or future agricultural operation or any of its facilities or appurtenances, while conducted, operated, or managed in a manner consistent with proper and accepted customs and standards on agricultural land shall become to be a nuisance per se for purposes of all chapters of the Land Use Act. Agricultural land is, well, we all understand what agricultural land is. Agricultural operation means, and include, but will not be limited to cultivation and management or tillage of soil, dairying, the production, irrigation, frost protection, cultivation, growing, harvesting, and processing of any agricultural commodity, including production of timbers, trees, shrubs, flowers, herbs, and all other plants. Viticulture, horticulture, apiculture, horses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Excuse me. Within the residential and estate general plan designations, the single-family dwellings of primary importance and agricultural uses are secondary. Within rural general plan designations, agricultural operations and natural resources-related uses and residential uses are of equal importance. RA allows agricultural activities and specifically says odor shall not be considered to be a nuisance. Why have you chosen to remove RA? It's clearly listed among AG, AE, and FR. I respectfully request you consider an action of a blanket RA ban with the appearance of discrimination to many. I also respectfully ask that the possibility of specific neighborhoods who have in fact driven this turmoil all along and recently specifically the RA ban should sit down and amend their CC&Rs and not punish the remainder of the county. I ask you to realize that many folks on RA properties are low-income, disabled, senior households who may have purchased in order to supply themselves or found themselves needing cannabis medicine, which you cannot afford. We cannot afford this. To go into a dispensary or grow indoors is extremely expensive. Your actions result in unneeded stress, pain, and suffering. I know cancer patients, myself being one, need to avoid stress. There are no questions as to why so many people are dissatisfied with this lack of foresight, compassion, and the willingness to listen to the majority on the subject. And I thank you very much for your time, gentlemen and ladies.
Thank you, Mark.
Hi, Forrest Hurt, District 4. Apologize. Here I just got a call to come pick up my son who's having some medical issues that is part of our life. So I will be very brief. I do want to second the points from the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance. I think they were valid as far as just getting at least some clarifications on some of the logistics there. I do not want to speak off topic, but I feel it pertains, and if it doesn't, I want to apologize in advance. I cannot share with you enough the gratitude for including non-remuneration and charity into this ordinance. My question is we're focused on getting commercial in and adding these permits, why we would not add being allowed to designate ourselves as a non-remuneration cultivation site while we're doing these other commercial permits, and if that is just a box to check as far as different purpose and intent, but we have validity, so we could not be afraid of being misconstrued as an inappropriate or not allowed black market grow and have some legitimacy and a little bit of security. So I'd be curious to see if you could discuss if that is a possibility without really changing the intent of the ordinance. And I would just add as a question that I'm not going to be able to stick around to hear, but hopefully someone can let me know. As it pertains to CEQA, we've had larger cultivation ordinances that have been allowed and uncontested and not challenged by CEQA. And I'm curious if the limits that we're limiting to not trigger CEQA, if that's being taken into account for the full history of the county. So because it is, even if we get allowed 25 plants, we can't do that in 1,000 square feet. So is it possible to look at prior allowances in the county to see what has been allowed, not contested by CEQA, to see if there is really any flexibility there to make something that is just applicable in real life. It's got to pan out to what we can actually use. And then, and excuse me, I rushed up here before I was totally prepared, but I would also just like to encourage the consideration of even though this has to do with commercial in the urgency ordinance, non-commercial personal activities. So if we can pass these urgency ordinances to get them in for the commercial folks, I want to really advocate for the people who are trying not to break the law, but just care for their own personal medical needs. And I'm speaking specifically just about some of the 6-plant outdoor allowances that we're looking at allowing. If we're going to be passing an urgency ordinance to get some of these things in, there's no permitting process necessary. All we need to do is say that they can start practicing some of those practices on those areas where right now it's all limited to indoor, which is just not really feasible for a lot of medical patients. So that, in addition to the support for how well articulated the Cannabis Alliance's points were, was what I have today. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Forrest.
Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Jones, District 4. Hank, you received an email from me this week. I forwarded it to the rest of you. Hope you took the time to read it. Our current ordinance is the way that you have it set up. We are prepared to have less than 100 people be able to qualify under the current ordinance because of the zoning and the setbacks. The success of your ordinance will be based on the number of people that can comply with this ordinance. I currently have my annual license ready to be submitted. I have my temporary state license ready to be permitted. I may not be applying for a permit through our county because the way that it is written is not economically feasible for many farmers. And I hope you can imagine what it will look like if nobody actually applies for your ordinance. The fact that growers are not allowed to have a current grow while in applying for this puts almost every grower out of the ability to apply. It's the middle of May already. Most people have their gardens already started, which means nobody can qualify for your ordinance. The act of applying through the state for this temporary ordinance under no specific category puts us at a financial risk of having to reapply at great economic cost to fit into the state categories. A cottage grow is 2,500 to 5,000 square feet. Our 1,000 square foot cultivation sizes will still be subject to those fees, and we will be subject to reapplying again at great economic cost to us and time. Our last meeting that we had here, you all agreed that 6 personal plants would not be considered part of a commercial grow. Yet here today, I see that this has been discounted. I'm concerned about our CEQA study that's become so important. Are we doing the CEQA study based on this little ban ordinance that we have currently, or are we doing it based on the ordinance that you have proposed? If we're doing it based on the current ban ordinance, it's a waste of our time and money, and I will encourage you to do the CEQA study based on the ordinance that you actually want the community to participate in. Thank you.
Thank you. And the CEQA study is being done on the new ordinance. Sir?
Hello, my name is Phil Ritty. I live in Grass Valley. My wife and I have attended most of these meetings. We have attended all the CAG meetings, so like you, we have been hearing lots of input. I have some just general comments to make that I hope you find useful. Your approach to developing an ordinance, whether it be permanent or the short term, has been marked by careful considerations. I know that you're using your personal convictions to make decisions, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. What you should also know, though, that creates a bias. And I don't mean that negatively. I mean that more in a sense of a statistical bias. And it's always difficult making decisions when you're running up against your personal convictions. And I'd like to recommend to you a process that I have found very successful in my business career when you deal with complex issues. And that is to create scenarios. Instead of trying to decide on one scenario what is right or wrong, create a scenario. And the one I would recommend you create is how to maximize the success of the cannabis industry in this county. I think if you did that exercise, you would open your minds up, or you would find new things. I'm not actually saying you're not open-minded. I think you would find new things. And ultimately, you're going to use your convictions to make decisions. You come back to that. I get that. But it is my belief and my experience is that when you create scenarios, you shed a lot of baggage, and you're able to consider things in a light that doesn't happen when you're only considering one scenario. So I think that if you were to consider a scenario of how to maximize the success of the cannabis industry in this county, you will ultimately make better decisions on the ordinances that you're creating. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. Mark?
Sorry, Mark Schaefer, District 4. I'm retired, but I can't shut up, so I'm back. I wanted to follow up on what Basil was saying about this issue of not being able to use this temporary license to apply for an annual state permit. And the problem that creates, because the temporary state permits are only 120 days, at the time that the farmers are going to be harvesting the crop that they're growing under this temporary permit, that 120 days will have run, and then they will no longer be able to be commercially viable to enter that product into the market. So one possible solution, and I haven't really thought this through, I was just thinking of while I was sitting there, was to, at the expiration of the temporary state license, to allow this local authorization under this permit to continue and allow these farmers to apply for their annual license, submitting only a site plan that allows the grow area that they're using this summer. And then once the permanent ordinance is in place, hopefully next spring, those growers can then go back to the state, and they will already have their annual license, but they can amend it by resubmitting a site plan that allows for the larger grow area based on the permanent ordinance. So I don't know if that made any sense, but it seems like to me it would work. So basically, you do allow these farmers to apply for an annual license, but the site plan they submit to the state is limited to the size that they're allowed to grow this summer. And then they can go and amend that once the permanent ordinance is in place. I don't see a problem with that. And then the other issue I wanted to address was the square footage and the CEQA. With respect to the additional impact, CEQA potential impact of like raising it from 1,000 square foot to 2,500 square foot, but still leaving it to 25 plants. All of the water usage and any CEQA impacts relative to the actual cultivation will not change because it's still the same number of plants. So perhaps putting in a provision that limits like tree removal or grading and says that you cannot increase your size from 1,000 to 2,500 if you have to remove any trees or if you have to do any grading that might have a CEQA impact, but still allow people to increase the size of their gardens this summer to make the 100 square feet per plant. So there's just two thoughts I had. And again, the Alliance would like to really be involved in these processes of drafting these ordinances, and if there's any way that it could be done, that we can continue to have input on an ongoing basis, I think it would make a lot of sense to have that additional eyes on the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I think I gave you Alliance time there.
Oh, I didn't know I was carrying on.
Oh, really? Harry.
Hi there. Thanks for your work, Harry Bennett in Nevada City. Two things I'd like to address here that I think are real important. First is the RA designation, but I just want to address the licensing. A county permit is not required to get a state license. All you need is an authorization. The county can do as little as not answer a letter from the state on an application, and the state will issue a license. You do not need, and if you'd like to ask me questions about it, I have 2 state licenses. I don't have a permit yet. We're still going through things. But the state will issue a license. If someone applies for one, the county does not reply in 10 days. The state will give a license. That or on a simple letter of authorization. So if staff would like to talk to you about that, again, I have 2 licenses. I know how this works. Me and our compliance person could help you out a little bit, and we have contacts at the state also. But I don't want to use up my time on that. I want to get to a real important part of this is the RA rural designation. We keep going back to this. And I think the problems are, go back 2 meetings ago when Sean described what RA was, and he gave a wrong definition. And then Mr. Anderson also last meeting, you said RA
is a residential zoning, and that is not true. And then in the paper, Dan, according to zoning definition, residential agriculture has a residential designation. That's not true. I have the general plan here, the agricultural element for it. RA in a rural zone is an agricultural land. It says rural zones. Sorry, I got the wrong one here, but it's a rural zone. It really should be called mini ag. RA in rural zoning districts is a rural and agricultural zone. RA in a state or residential, how resident is over agriculture operations. In rural designations, it is equal to farming, and living is the same. Residential agriculture, living, farming. I think we should have a good study or good clarification. This was a big issue too. Hank, when we were on the ad hoc committee 2 meetings ago, we spent a whole meeting on RA, and that's the reason it was put in here separate from it. In areas designated primarily for agricultural use, AG, AE, FR, TPZ, and areas designated in the
Watch your
Nevada
clock,
County
Harry.
Plan. Pardon?
Watch your clock.
Okay.
I think
Could
we
get
got,
the
I
5
think,
minutes
I think
from
we
all-
got
from
your
my work?
point.
Okay, but we went through this.
I just gave
county-
Mark 5 minutes.
Pardon me?
I just gave Mark 5 minutes.
I know, but you know, I mean, I've done the work. I've done these volunteer works. You asked me to be on the
I know,
board here.
I know, I know. Hurry up.
Sheriff asked me
Hurry
to
up,
be-
hurry up.
Okay. This was a big issue. County council looked into it. We all studied it. Hank was on the board, Captain Pattis, all of us studied it, and we came up with RA, rural designation, belongs in ag. You're taking away farming from, you know, most of the farmers that I do business with, all RA. We moved here to be, a lot of people live in these zones because they want these mini farms. That's what it is, a mini farm. You know, 2 acres is plenty. You know, that's 100,000 square feet. You're talking about, you know, not even 1% of the
Okay.
land. Thank you, guys.
We hear what you're saying, Harry. We do. Thank you. Sir?
Good morning. My name is Well, good afternoon, I guess. My name is Abraham. You know, I wanted to thank the Board of Supervisors and the county staff for meeting with some of us. I really appreciate that. I just wanted to again express how important it is that if we want, I mean, the goal here of the county is to bring as many people into compliance at the end of the day. And in order to do that, we have to give some meat here on this. And there's no meat here. And this ordinance is basically saying, if I had a pizzeria, that I could sell only large pizzas on Mondays and Tuesdays, and I'll have to charge $100 for them. So, you know, that will maybe keep me open for a week, and then I'll have to shut down the pizzeria. So the restrictions on the square feet is very, very low. I don't see how one can survive right now economically. And the second thing is the setbacks. It needs to be reduced to 100 as the proposed future ordinance, because some people, and I'm in them, already are submitting plans based on the 100 feet setback. And they're with the county now. What am I to do? So there's a problem here, and I think that you understand, and you have the power to keep us pushing forward, because right now we're just going to go backwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Abraham.
Hi there. My name's Patty Lawrence, and I'm sorry to be the third person with a solution for temporary permits, but something slightly different than what Mark and Basil suggested. If a temporary permit could be used along with this annual state license application, the assumption would still be that the temporary permit needs to be renewed or an annual local permit needs to be obtained before the expiration of that temporary permit. Even if I have an annual license to do business for a year, I'd still need to keep my local permit updated, so that would be an option until an annual local permit option is in place. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty.
Hi, my name is Mary Alice Riddy, and I became a cannabis activist when the ban was put in place 2 years ago. And as I sit under this portrait of a gold miner, we're supposed to be in the middle of a gold or a green rush, and I don't see any rush. So, but anyway, I'm kind of disappointed in the temporary ordinance. I think it's too restrictive. I think you need to open your minds to, this will become, as time goes by, a very respectable industry, just like the wine industry in Napa and Sonoma. And it's an economy for our community. Since I've moved up here 5 years ago, I've never met so many single parents. I hear about, you know, at the Sierra Harvest Luncheon, 50% of the students in Nevada County are on the free lunch program. I think I'm looking forward to a robust economy. I think it would be shameful to stand in the way of this happening for our county. We need to be more open-minded. I would recommend that you watch the movie Prohibition by Ken Burns. It's about coming out of the alcohol prohibition. And it's the same thing that's going to happen in our county. The regulations will clean up the industry, and that we need to do that here. And instead of placing blame on all the growing community, we need to just weed out the bad apples, and we can do that by being less restrictive and more welcoming to the people in the community that have been here growing and would like to continue to grow. You know, it's been said to me, well, what they've been doing is illegal. Yes, it has been. They haven't been, you know, contributing to the tax base. That's all going to turn around, and I welcome it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Jonathan.
Jonathan Collier, District 1. First off, I just want to appreciate the goodwill gesture that the temporary license is meant to do. I think it really shows a departure from where we've been and really highlights where we're going. With that, obviously, there's a lot of things that are broken, but I think that's one of the things that I see today is even before the public comment, there was actually really good discussion about those things and how to move that forward. So the commencement being a big one, I think the solution, actually both Ed and Richard, you were moving on it, is that we could start as personal, being in compliance with the current ordinance, and in being in compliance, it wouldn't actually eliminate us from the state licensure. So I think there is a possibility of a transition that in the idea that you guys were discussing. As far as the expiration, again, I think that was also highlighted by yourselves before the discussion is, or at least by staff, is that how to extend that. It doesn't really make sense. I think Basil really articulately highlighted the problem with that, and if we simply strike the inability to apply for the annual license, we should be able to get there. And I think that the ordinance has built-in mechanisms, particularly in section O, 7H, and 7F, that basically say that if you're not in compliance with the state or local regulations, that it would revoke the license. So I think the built-in mechanisms would allow you to extend and do the annual permit, and if they're not up to par with the annual, then you can just revoke it. So I think that that should be a fix for that. I think there needs to be clarity within the square foot and the plant count in square foot, because currently as the ordinance reads, it is within 1,000 square feet, so 25 plants within 1,000 square feet. So right now, 25 plants would be great, but I think a lot of folk are looking at that as the 100 square feet. But with the way the ordinance reads, I think there needs to be clarity, and that's why, again, we're pushing for the state definition of square foot and how that would work. So that would be the 2,500 square feet, the 1,600 square feet. And the ability to grow within the square foot parameter there's a different style that would make it almost financially feasible. But I think that's the big thing. We did have a course last Thursday when these were released. We did host a workshop, and it's going to be really difficult. So even with these changes, we only really see a handful of people being able to make it through. But again, we do appreciate the good faith that you're showing in moving in this direction. We just don't want to be a lot of surprises if only a modest amount, if any, actually are able to do this. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Wade?
Wade Laughter. Thank you, Chairman Schofield and supervisors for your, it seems to me that this conversation has changed a lot in the last few years. I wish to acknowledge the supervisors, each of you in turn, for your concise questions and an attempt to find a way to encourage people like myself to actually get into a regulated marketplace and obey the rules. It's really inspiring to see the changes that have happened up here. To repeat what several people have said, this urgency ordinance is from the point of view of someone who might actually try to get into the regulated marketplace, does not seem very workable. I'll leave it at that. My suggestion, I don't have many concrete suggestions, but one of them would be that part of what I think we're struggling with is the folks who are coming up with the regulations and the rules do not really, in fact, understand the industry they're trying to regulate. I think there's an opportunity, people like myself, many other folks who are not formally organized, for example, in the Alliance, we have expertise and understanding of how this industry works. I have offered more than once myself personally, and I know a number of other people have offered, to work with county staff to help the staff understand how this industry works so that they can draft regulations that would work for the industry. This existing industry, it's not like we're talking about creating 100 lead smelters in the county. Most of the farmers who would actually want to get into the regulated marketplace will be responsible stewards of the environment. An accurate CEQA study would suggest that regulated marketplace actually would significantly enhance the environment of our county. But because, for the most part, the view of the cannabis industry is as a bunch of crooks, outlaws, and callous disregard for the environment and the community and public safety, the rules have to be drafted for the worst actors. And I'm really asking you, as the supervisors, to direct staff to recognize this is an existing industry. Most of the people who are in this industry today, particularly if their focus is on medicine, care very much about the environment, care very much about being responsible stewards of their land and being involved in their communities. I'm struggling with my words because my body is not cooperating very well right at the moment. But I want to close by saying thank you to each of you. Some of you, I've struggled with the questions that you've asked, but what I get is every one of you are trying very hard to help us be happy. But like every negotiation in business, we're coming out where nobody's really happy. And if that was the goal, I think we've achieved that. Thank you.
Thank you, Wade. All right. Seeing nobody else, I think we will close the public comment portion of this, and we will bring it back to the Board of Supervisors and to our staff for final discussion and an outcome on this. Why should I look at you first? Go ahead, Heidi.
Thank you, Ed. I want to thank everyone for the public comments, especially those that are civil and offering suggested solutions to some of the issues that you've raised. I think there's 2 points that remain for me, and I'm wondering if staff can help us work on that. So it sounded like there's some disagreement about whether the state would or would not allow folks to start growing with a local temporary license. So my question or my request would be, can you look into that? And if what we're hearing is true, if the state regulators say you can start growing with a temporary local license, can we adapt this ordinance to make that possible, or adapt the process then to make that possible?
Well, and part of what I heard also, Supervisor Hall, was that there was, they certainly can grow with a temporary state license too. That process is very streamlined. There's very little oversight and very little that goes into that application, and people are actually having those temporary licenses for cultivation issued. And they certainly can grow under those licenses. I don't believe they can grow and enter the commercial market under the state regulation without having the state license. But like we discussed earlier, there's nothing preventing them from growing in the proper zones. The minute they want to make that a commercial activity, much like with the state, they have to have that license. They have to fall into that category, but I can certainly look further into it.
Okay. I guess, I mean, I want to make sure that the ordinance language isn't so restrictive that we can't adapt if we're finding new information, as this is continually changing. So if we could try to make this, the two things work. First, getting the plants in the ground legally with both licenses in place, if at all possible. And the second one is to look at some of these potential solutions for allowing them to apply for an annual permit while they're still on the temporary permit. I think those would resolve some of the issues that might be able to be resolved within the scope of this existing ordinance. That would be my request. And then my final request would be, it sounded really reasonable to me if we change the square footage to meet the state licenses without changing the plants, then we're not, and there were some other suggestions about how to make sure it doesn't trigger CEQA. I'd have to see my board, see what my fellow board members think, but that sounds really reasonable. We're not asking to increase the plant count, we're just asking to increase the square footage.
Right, and I think that's the outdoor square footage that makes the CEQA issue more difficult. So we actually are expanding. That would be over doubling the maximum square footage outdoors on those sites, which would create the environmental review at this point. So they can grow the 25 plants outside within 1,000 square feet, but it sounds like they're seeking to expand that to the 2,500 square feet outside, and that's what would be problematic with the CEQA evaluation and the exemption we're currently claiming for the urgency ordinance.
And that's legal opinion at this point?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up on what Heidi's saying. I mean, what if we did expand it to 2,500 square feet? Are we just rolling the dice on that and seeing if we get challenged?
I think you've heard in the past that we had even some concerns with our old ordinance kind of pressing our nose against the glass with CEQA. We've been lucky and not been challenged with that. And expanding, we're now adding a commercial piece to it that has not been studied from a CEQA standpoint, so we're pushing the limits a little bit with that regard, but expanding it over doubling the outdoor grow sizes in most of those places we believe would be a more significant risk for a CEQA challenge.
Yeah, I mean, to bring it back to focus on, we're looking at medical commercial growing. We all believe that there are medical applications that are viable for people who have certain ailments. I've always believed that there's a medical piece to cannabis that we have to recognize, and that's what we're looking at. And Diana says that the state allows planting during transition. We need to increase the square footage of 2,500 because of possibility of mold or things happening to plants if they're grown too closely. And then what Forrest brought up was an interesting one as far as the non-remuneration, allow cultivation for those entities that are growing medical cannabis for non-remuneration. And we're not requiring a permit for that?
Currently, a qualified caregiver is able to grow for patients personally. So the personal grow ordinance allows primary caregivers to grow.
Yeah, without a permit.
Correct.
So I think that's something we really need to look to because, Forrest, I'm sorry Forrest had to leave, but that was a real strong point as far as his presentation and something I think for us to consider as far as possibly granting that opportunity. Take a look at it.
Certainly, the current ordinance does, which would still be in play with this urgency ordinance, does permit a qualified caregiver to grow for qualified patients. That's already built into the current ordinances we have it.
Right. Okay, go ahead, okay.
Well, wait a minute, I'll get back to that. So, how much can they grow for non-remuneration?
Currently, our ordinance allows for, you have your personal grow sizes, but we allow for primary caregivers to grow for qualified patients. So within the confines of the ordinance's grow sizes is what's currently permitted.
Okay. Well, I mean, is there something more that we have to add to make sure that it's clear, like the forest isn't here, but it's clear that you can still continue that practice that he would like to see?
I'm not entirely clear what practice, like I said,
I mean,
the primary caregivers can currently grow on their personal grow sizes under the zones and the grow sizes they have allowed under the current ordinance. Okay. The new ordinance moving forward has specific non-remuneration language in built in to exclude them from the permitting well, they have a permitting process, but to exclude them from a more rigorous process than we have built in for the commercial activity. As it is now, a primary caregiver can cultivate for primary patients. We don't have a limit on the number and the 5 plants per person language in our current ordinance.
So somebody brought up that the 6 personal plants are now part of the commercial. Is that true? Because I thought the 6 are based on 64 are personal, it's their own business.
They can still grow the 6 plants in all zones. That's under Prop 64.
Not counting what they may do for what the temporary license, what the temporary ordinance is saying, urgency ordinance is saying.
Right, it's not, the 6 plants is not being affected by the new urgency piece.
Well, I guess it would certainly be easier right now if we're going to try and encourage good growers to switch to square footage within the existing numbers that we have. Now, I realize that that might be an increase. I guess that's the decision on whether it's enough for a CEQA review rests with us, right?
That's correct, and Allison could probably expand more on those issues, but that was part of the presentation in May was talking about creating a temporary licensing situation using the old ordinance to avoid the CEQA challenge. Expanding on the grow sizes and increasing that square footage outdoor would create complications with claiming a CEQA exemption. That's a more significant change environmentally.
So somebody brought up a point, and I can't remember, but what was allowed to be grown prior to this last ordinance? I mean, was there increases? I mean, what were the count figures? I mean, are we really, if we go to square footage, 16 plants, 1,600 square feet. If we go to square footage, are we really adding that much more than we had in previous ordinances? I don't have all the old ordinances. I can't even tell you.
I'm not sure the one I have goes back far enough to where I believe they're speaking about original ordinances that were many, many years ago. But we're talking about a change from a CEQA analysis standpoint, a change of what we currently have existing to a new ordinance that we have, and that's the change that's going to be relevant to the exemption that we're claiming in this particular ordinance.
If I could, it's a hard question to answer on the fly, but my recollection is that the current ordinance as to AG, AE, and FR is the most liberal ordinance we have had since we started regulating. So I'm not sure where the belief that we are being more restrictive came from, because I believe this is the most, from a plant size, plant number perspective, the board liberalized the AG, AE, FR with the last round of ordinance.
I'm a little concerned with the square foot concept. I mean, it sounds to me like this is going to be a question that's going to be an ongoing question, as is the RA. And it concerns me a little bit that we say, well, you know, we can't really do that because this is what the CEQA process is. So this is what the CEQA process is going to look like, is exactly what we're looking at right now. But that question isn't going to go away. So once you've got the CEQA process, the EIR done, then you say, well, you can't go any further because this is what we approved under the CEQA process. And I'm not so sure. It just seems to me that now is the time we should be looking at some of these issues, or it's going to cost us another CEQA to go through it again to look at these questions again. Does it sound like me? No, it doesn't.
I'm hearing,
And I would say, you know, the issue here is the emergency ordinance, and this goes beyond the emergency ordinance, but it's a concern. Heidi, I'm sorry.
No, I hear you, Ed. I think I'm hearing that this board would like to see us expand the square footage in the urgency ordinance without allowing additional plants. That you guys will have to tell me if that's true. That I understand that the legal folks here consider that a risk, but we can say we think it's not as big a risk as you do, or that we're willing to take that risk and we can expand the square footage to meet the state regulations without touching the plants. And that would then help us in the next ordinance, which is what we're going to be looking at, those same square footage.
I don't know that I agree with it at all, Heidi, but I'm just saying that's what the EIR does. It looks at those and says maybe 2,500 square feet is a big issue, and you're going to have to find some way to mitigate that. I don't know that answer right now.
But we're on our complete EIR, that's what we're looking at, but on a temporary EIR is what we're trying to avoid as far as a challenge. And that's why we're looking at the 1,000 square foot. And Richard and I were talking, a little clarification, when we're talking RA, we're talking residential ag.
Not rural.
This particular,
not rural ag.
This particular urgency ordinance does not affect that. There is no commercial activity in RA or rural, any designation under this urgency. So only commercial activity that's being proposed by this urgency ordinance is in the AG, AE, and FR zones.
Right.
So the RA ordinance would only be for personal use as it's currently permitted.
And that's residential ag.
Right, for personal use only.
Yes, thank you. Which has a designation of residential. Residential ag has a designation of, Sean? There's different, I mean, we've got.
There's three designations
Right.
of the RA. So we have the ones that have been discussed, the rural, the estate, and the res.
Yeah.
So of those three, any RA parcel would have one of those three designations.
Right, and I'm basically focused on the residential ag, not the residential estate.
No, we've already agreed on that,
Yeah.
the residential
Yeah,
part
so-
of it. I think, I think it is very restrictive. The other option we had, though, was not to do it at all, to go through the ER, the CEQA process. I know it's difficult. This is not an easy process, and it can be painful, but I think it's the steps we have to take. I'm ready to go ahead and make the urgency ordinance based upon the permits this year. I'm a little concerned about the big ordinance that we're looking at, that maybe there's a bigger picture we should be looking at.
Can we, though, direct staff to try to figure out how to make it work in terms of getting the plants in the ground now and then having a method to apply for their annual permit? I mean, those two issues are about keeping them legal. Those two issues are to allow them to get legal and to stay legal without falling out of the process. That's, you know, I feel like we could at least do that.
Heidi, I think we all appreciate that approach, but I want to ask county council or staff, what do they see as the downsides to that? You know, let's make sure that we're walking into this fully informed with regard to the minuses as well as the pluses.
I'm sorry, Supervisor Anderson. Could you repeat that, please?
Well, you know, with regard to Heidi's idea of ensuring that, well, Heidi, why don't you state it rather than me interpret your words?
I think Richard was asking for your opinion on this, but my request was not specific. It was kind of leaving it up to you to figure out a way that folks could get their plants in the ground while they're waiting for their state permit and apply for the annual permit while they're still on a temporary permit, both things which would keep them in the legal realm. It wouldn't affect their growing or it wouldn't affect much else except allow them to be legal because they bothered to come in the first place to become legal. So if there's something we can do, whether it's taking out a word here or there in the ordinance or just making it a programmatic decision, if there's some way we can do that.
And Supervisor Hall, I think now they can plant. It's just if they wanted to get into the commercial market, they're not going to get permitted until they go through that process for the temporary local permits. But the ordinance allows them to plant now, it just can't enter the commercial market. As far as the annual permit, this was something that we talked about a little bit on May 1st. There is a bit of a conundrum trying to solve that problem. We thought a lot about it, but we can certainly think some more about it.
Well, aren't the state permits still temporary?
Yes, I checked the site today, actually, and so for the cultivation in a license search, I found only temporary licenses, and there had been no annual cultivation licenses that have been issued as of yet. Applications are being accepted, but there were none listed on the site as far as issued licenses.
So if we continued in that same vein, that we issue temporary licenses, I mean, at some point, I guess with the new ordinance, at that point they could transition over to a permanent license.
Their concern is that the state temporary license expires after 120 days. For them to get the 90-day extension, they require an application for the permanent state license to be on file. That process takes a while to go through, but in order to get that first 90-day extension, you have to have that application on file.
But even with this new change in the to July or June 30th of 2019, they still have to reply every 120 days?
Yes, and I'm sure it's for the same considerations we have with our own temporary permit system, being that the actual application process for the temporary permits is not at all robust. It's a very simple application process, so they do require that it expire and that they keep that process going for the permanent licenses and get involved in that more robust process, which is why we have ours in a limited term for the very same reason. We just don't have a robust analysis in place for the temporary permit process.
I have two conversations going up here. And Richard, I'm trying to listen to her, not you guys.
Apologies.
Okay. What'd you say?
Okay, what we were talking about was that what we're hearing is that cultivators can grow right now.
Right.
What cannot happen is they cannot enter into the legal marketplace until they have the permit. Well, while the plants are growing, they're in the permit process for the local and the state permit. By the time harvest hits, then they should have both of those permits in place, which would then allow them to go into the legal marketplace as a commercial grower. Am I correct on that, or did we miss something?
Yeah, Supervisor Miller, we currently have nothing to prevent them from entering the commercial market once they're going after the permitting process if they plan it early. They just have to go through the system of the inspections and to ensure compliance, they would get the local permit and then they could apply for their state.
Okay, so during that inspection, if they've got 25 plants growing in 1,000 square foot, they pass inspection, am I correct?
Correct.
Would that put them in any jeopardy with regard to the sheriff's department?
Not if they're in compliance with the ordinance, and under that scenario, they would be in compliance, assuming all other factors were met.
Well, this is the same ordinance that we've had for a number of years now.
That's correct.
And there have been situations where the sheriff's gone out and said, yeah, okay, you guys are in compliance. So those.
Yeah, the only caveat is that they're requesting 2,500 square feet and not 1,000.
Well, I know, but the existing, what we're looking at.
Right.
This can be changed easier than something that has the CEQA, the larger ordinance at this point. This is an emergency ordinance, can be changed as we feel necessary. Am I correct?
That's true. It's a good segue into the process issue you might want to think about as you're debating these issues. The urgency ordinance as presented to you and as designed, if approved today, would take effect immediately. So that would allow staff to move forward with the process that they have outlined to you to make the temporary licenses available. In order to adopt it today, though, it really needs to be adopted as is. So minor clerical changes, such as the change in the expiration date from December to June of next year, would be okay. But substantive changes, like you are now talking about in terms of changing grow size areas, that's not a minor clerical change, so the law does require that we bring it back for reintroduction and adoption at a subsequent meeting. So if you want to make more substantive changes, we would need to bring it back, and that's partly for transparency and public noticing purposes.
Doesn't it come back anyways?
Not if you adopt it as currently presented to you.
My question is, as it's worded, and I wish I could look word for word right now as we're having this discussion, but I have to rely on you guys. As it's worded right now, can we pursue these things we've talked about in terms of growing now and getting the license in place and being able to be commercially viable this year? Will any words in the ordinance prevent us from helping make that happen right now?
There's nothing in the current ordinance that prevents them from planting under the current ordinance. If they want to engage in the commercial aspect of it, then they would have to go through the process that's outlined in this urgency ordinance. But right now, there's nothing preventing them from planting as the ordinance exists today. But to enter into the commercial cannabis activity piece of it, they would have to have the licenses in place.
But wasn't there something in here saying they cannot apply to for the annual license by the state?
No, there's nothing that says they cannot apply. It says that they cannot use the temporary local permit for purposes of local authorization for a state annual permit.
Well, why are we doing it?
If they're able to get the temporary state license, so they can use our temporary local authorization to apply for their temporary state license and enter the commercial market that direction. We're talking about not allowing our short abbreviated analysis process for the temporary license to be used for the long-term state permanent annual license. So they were able to get the temporary state license.
Which expires in 120 days. And they can extend at 90 days, but only if they can apply for the annual license that we're telling them they cannot use their current permit to apply for. That's the problem I'm having.
And that's correct. And like I said before, this is a situation we were talking about, much like the state's processes. The state's temporary license is valid for only 120 days, presumably because the application process is so abbreviated. They don't have to go through the robust analysis that they do under the annual license piece. We are tracking the state the same way, saying we're doing our temporary license. We're talking about a short-term temporary situation with very little application analysis done, and that's going to have an expiration date and not be used for the permanent piece. There's also the difficulty that if they get their annual state license that's for an entire year and our ordinance changes, that adds a complication to it. So they're...
Can we add some language that allows us to adapt to any state changes with regard to temporary license in case they make some change to make this easier?
For across the board, because the state license, that entire structure will be changing supposedly as of July 1st of next year. So it'd be difficult to adapt this to react to that in whole cloth because we really have no idea what that's going to look like. If you're talking about dates and extensions and that sort of thing, we can.
Yeah, in case if there are cannabis alliances or other counties are working with the state to say this doesn't work with an urgency ordinance like this, can we make some changes? And if the state agrees to make some changes to that, I would like us to be able to then adapt those into this urgency ordinance.
We can certainly come back and amend the ordinance before you if those changes were necessary. To make a substantive changes here, as Allison mentioned, would make it difficult to approve today.
Ed, are you ready for a motion?
I believe I'm ready, yes.
I make a motion that we adopt the urgency ordinance as written.
There is the amendment, Supervisor Miller,
Yes,
for the date.
You're amending subsection G dash 4, 5.4.E.3 of, and adding subsection G 4, 5.40 to Article 5 of Chapter 4 of the Nevada County General Code regarding temporary medical commercial cannabis permits.
With the amendment to G-4, 5.404, changing the date from December 31st, 2018 to June 30th, 2019.
Yes.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion, Supervisor Miller, seconded Supervisor Hall.
Is there any discussion?
Any further discussion, Hank?
So, Craig, what about the 60-day issue? Does that have to come back?
I think we can use the flexibility of how we handle normal permitting processes. It's kind of what we talked about as far as issue of conditions of approval for the site, and then coming into compliance prior to obtaining a permanent permit in the actual county.
Well, I don't want anybody denied because they can't get their permit for their house in 60 days to be growing. Because that's what it says. It says, must correct the violation within 60 days after issuance.
We could add a clerical amendment to say it must be corrected within 60 days or as otherwise directed by the chief building official.
Does that give you the...
That gives us the flexibility to be able to
Okay.
operate.
Maker of the motion accept that? Second? Okay. And we'll vote on the motion as amended. Twice. Madam Clerk?
District 4?
Yes.
District 1? Yes. District 3?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you to all you for your patience. I know it's not an easy process, but we are getting there. With that, it's 1:45. I think we'll pass on announcements until another meeting. With that, we are adjourned. Oh, I know it was his fault.
They won't.
Right, when I get sick, I'm just going to your office. Sit next to you all day.